In the cradle of civilization, where ancient empires rose and fell beneath sun-scorched skies, there are secrets buried so deep, even time itself seems unwilling to disturb them. From the shifting sands of the Rub al-Khali to the forgotten ruins along the Tigris and Euphrates, something lingers. Whispers of strange lights over sacred mountains. Undeciphered scripts carved into stones older than the pyramids. Structures aligned so precisely with celestial bodies, it challenges everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. Science has offered theories, some bold, others hesitant, but many of these mysteries remain stubbornly unresolved. Why do some ruins pulse with unexplained magnetic energy? Who, or what, built underground cities with such complexity thousands of years before recorded engineering? And why do so many local legends across nations and centuries tell eerily similar tales of sky beings, buried gates, and vanished knowledge? This is not myth, this is not fiction. These are anomalies backed by evidence and silence. So sit back, relax, and let's dive deep into the heart of the Middle East, where science meets the unknown and every grain of sand might be guarding a truth we're not yet ready to face. Beneath the scorching sun and sweeping winds of the Arabian desert lies one of the most enigmatic landscapes on Earth, the Rub al-Khali, or the Empty Quarter. It is a place where the sands stretch endlessly to the horizon, shifting like waves in a silent ocean of gold. The sky above is a pale, unforgiving dome. Few creatures thrive here. Fewer still have dared to cross it. But beneath these ancient dunes, some believe, lies the ruin of a forgotten city. A city that once gleamed with wealth, rose with pride, and then vanished, swallowed whole by time and sand. They called it Iram. Iram of the Pillars. Mentioned briefly in the Quran, the city of Iram is described as possessing lofty pillars, the like of which had never been created in the land. A place of immense power, prestige, and architectural marvel. According to Islamic tradition, it was inhabited by the people of Ad, an ancient tribe said to have turned against the will of God, consumed by arrogance and excess. Their punishment was swift. The city was destroyed, buried beneath a storm that raged for days, and then forgotten. But was Iram ever real? For centuries, the tale of Iram was regarded by many as myth, a parable meant to teach humility, not a record of history. There was no archaeological evidence, no preserved inscriptions, no ruins, only legend and sand. Yet in the 1990s, a startling discovery reignited the debate. Using satellite imaging and remote sensing technology, researchers identified a series of ancient trade routes beneath the Rub al-Khali, converging on a single point near the modern border of Oman and Saudi Arabia. It was a location known today as Ubar, a name echoed in regional folklore as the Atlantis of the Sands. Excavations at the site uncovered a collapsed limestone cavern beneath what appeared to be the remains of a once thriving settlement. The dig revealed pottery shards, stone walls, and a deep well, suggesting a city that had prospered as a hub of the frankincense trade more than 4,000 years ago. Could this be Iram? Many archaeologists believed so. The evidence was compelling. A prominent location on ancient caravan routes, signs of sudden collapse, and a timeline that fit within the possible window of the Ad civilization. Ubar, they argued, was Iram, not a ghost city built on divine wrath, but a trading center lost to natural disaster. But the mystery didn't end there. The site at Ubar was smaller than expected, lacking the grandiose pillars described in Scripture. Was it only a part of a larger complex? Or had erosion and collapse destroyed the structures before they could be recorded? Some scholars suggest the term pillars could have referred to tall tents or wooden structures, not stone columns. Others point to the geological instability of the region, arguing that sinkholes and subterranean erosion could have swallowed entire settlements without leaving much trace. Yet the name Iram continues to evoke something deeper, something older. Several fringe researchers believe Iram was more than a trade outpost. They suggest it may have been a center of ancient knowledge, an early cradle of science, alchemy, or even technology lost to time. Echoes of this idea appear in legends told by Bedouin tribes, in stories of ancient beings, half divine, half human, who brought learning to the desert and were later cast down for their pride. Some link the story to other global myths, Atlantis, Mu, or the Sumerian accounts of antediluvian cities destroyed by floods and fire. One of the most persistent questions is how a civilization capable of constructing monumental architecture in one of the harshest environments on Earth could simply disappear. No written records remain. No clear cultural descendants have been identified. Could climate change alone explain their extinction? Was it drought, war, or something more deliberate? And then, there is the question of time. The dating of artifacts from the Ubar site places it roughly around 2800 to 300 BC, but references to Iram suggest a city even older. Some theories suggest that Iram predates even the rise of Mesopotamian civilization, that it may have been one of the first urban centers ever built, existing before Sumer, before Uruk, before recorded history itself. If so, what forces shaped it? And what forces destroyed it? Even today, the sands of the empty quarter remain largely unexplored. The desert shifts constantly, burying and revealing fragments with the seasons. New satellite scans occasionally detect anomalies, unusual patterns beneath the dunes that resist easy explanation. Some hint at buried walls, linear stone alignments, or unnatural depressions. Yet logistical challenges and political boundaries make full-scale excavation nearly impossible. Still, the story endures. Is Iram merely a cautionary tale, carved into the cultural memory of a region haunted by its own fragility? Or was it real? A city of splendor that defied the desert, only to be erased by forces beyond comprehension. Perhaps the ruins lie just a few meters deeper than any spade has reached. Or perhaps they were never meant to be found. For now, Iram remains suspended between myth and history, faith and science, a name spoken in reverence and in mystery. What else sleeps beneath the sands? And if we found it, would we even recognize it for what it truly was? As we leave behind the lost sands of Iram and journey north, we find ourselves among the craggy cliffs and shadowed hollows of the Judean desert. A landscape that holds secrets written not in myth, but in metal. Here, in 1952, inside a windswept cave near the ruins of Qumran, archaeologists unearthed something unlike any of the other Dead Sea Scrolls. It was not a fragile parchment or an ancient piece of leather. It was a brittle, oxidized sheet of pure copper, corroded with age, yet unmistakably artificial. A scroll, not meant to be read aloud, but to instruct. Not a religious text, but a list. Now known simply as the Copper Scroll, this relic stands apart from all other discoveries at Qumran. Carved meticulously into thin copper sheets and rolled tightly into two separate parts, the scroll contains an inventory, written in a form of Hebrew that is both familiar and peculiar. Line after line, it lists 64 locations, each one tied to quantities of buried gold, silver, and precious vessels. The total amount is staggering, by some estimates over 200 tons of treasure. But what kind of document is this? Mainstream scholars have long debated the scroll's purpose. Some suggest it may have been a record of temple treasures hidden away during the Roman siege of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Others think it could predate that event entirely, perhaps a catalog of wealth concealed by a priestly sect, or even remnants of Solomon's riches scattered during one of Israel's many invasions. Yet, curiously, none of the treasure described in the scroll has ever been found. Despite decades of expeditions and close textual analysis, the locations remain cryptic. References like, "in the valley of Achor under the third step," or "in the cistern near the funeral shrine," offer just enough detail to tantalize, but not enough to guide. Were these physical places meant to be recognized by initiates? Could the instructions have been written to be deliberately obscure, encrypted to protect what lay beneath? Some researchers point to linguistic oddities in the text. The Hebrew used is highly technical, containing terms rarely seen elsewhere. There is no overt theological message, no quotations from Scripture, only practical directives, weights, measures, and hidden places. That alone has led some to suggest it was not a religious artifact at all, but rather a coded inventory for a secret society or underground resistance movement. Still others wonder, what kind of group would have access to this much wealth in the first place? Speculation leads us in many directions. Some believe the scroll could represent the lost treasures of the Second Temple, hidden from the Romans as Jerusalem fell. Others imagine it to be even older, perhaps a surviving fragment of the First Temple's treasures, hidden away during the Babylonian invasion in 586 BC. A few voices, more speculative in nature, suggest links to the mysterious Essenes, the sect believed to have lived at Qumran, guardians not just of scripture, but of esoteric knowledge and sacred relics. And then there are those who take the scroll into stranger territory. Could the treasure mentioned in the copper scroll be symbolic rather than literal? Could the vessels and talents of gold represent knowledge, spiritual, astronomical, or even technological, preserved in coded form? If so, what knowledge was so dangerous it had to be hidden across dozens of locations, inscribed in copper, and left to corrode in a desert cave? More fringe theories stretch further still. Some posit that the scroll may be a remnant of an even older civilization, one that existed before the known kingdoms of the Levant, one that stored its wealth and wisdom far from prying eyes. A few draw parallels between the scroll's list of hidden sites and patterns in ancient Mesopotamian or Egyptian sacred geography. Others connect it to the Ark of the Covenant, suggesting, without evidence but with curiosity, that perhaps the list leads to that ultimate prize, buried far from the walls of any known temple. Despite years of study, no consensus has been reached. Some scholars remain skeptical, suggesting the scroll was little more than an idealized inventory, a record of treasure that never truly existed, a kind of spiritual allegory meant to inspire rather than instruct. But the precision of its details resists easy dismissal. Why go to such lengths to carve fantasy into copper? And if the treasure was real, where is it now? Could it have already been recovered, quietly, secretly, by those who understood the clues better than any modern reader? Could the sites it points to now lie beneath highways, cities, or lands, closed off by politics and borders? Or have the sands and stones of the Judean desert simply swallowed them whole, keeping their secrets as they have for millennia? Even today, the copper scroll continues to defy classification. It is both map and mystery, warning and invitation, a single document that challenges our understanding of ancient history, not through theology or myth, but through the cold, unblinking logic of a list. A list that, if real, could change everything we know about the wealth, power, and knowledge of ancient Israel. What lies beneath the third step? Who walked those valleys with keys to buried gold? And how many more secrets wait, etched in silence, just beyond the reach of understanding? As we leave behind the copper scroll's cryptic instructions, our journey takes us eastward, toward the heartland of ancient Assyria, where stone meets myth, and the ruins of empire still whisper through the dust. Rising from the plains of northern Iraq, near modern-day Mosul, lie the remnants of one of the most ambitious urban projects of the ancient world, Khorsabad, once the magnificent capital of King Sargon II. Built in the late 8th century BC, it was meant to be a testament to Assyrian power, a city of immense walls, detailed carvings, and sacred architecture. But towering above its foundations stood something even more symbolic, a great ziggurat, the stepped pyramid believed to be a bridge between heaven and earth. Today, little remains of the ziggurat's original height. Its mud brick core is long eroded, its outer layers reduced to scattered stone. But beneath the broken tiers and collapsed platforms, some archaeologists believe there may still be secrets hidden. Sealed chambers, whose contents have never been fully explored, and whose purpose remains cloaked in uncertainty. The Ziggurat of Khorsabad, also known in antiquity as Dur-Shahrukhan, was unlike many others in Mesopotamia. It was not merely a temple platform, but a center of ritual, astronomy, and statecraft. Inscriptions found on site describe it as part of the House of the Mountain of the Universe, a phrase that echoes with cosmological meaning. The Assyrians, like their Sumerian predecessors, viewed these stepped towers as cosmic ladders, places where divine energy could descend and kings could communicate with the gods. But as the 19th century excavations of Khorsabad progressed, led first by French archaeologist Paul-Émile Botta, something unusual began to emerge. Beneath the ziggurat's base, a network of stone-lined passages and hidden rooms was discovered. Some were filled with rubble and pottery fragments. Others were empty and eerily silent. Botta and his team, working with limited tools and facing harsh conditions, documented only a portion of these underground features before abandoning the site. Later efforts in the 20th century would revisit Khorsabad, but full access to the substructure of the ziggurat has never been achieved. Political unrest, environmental damage, and ongoing regional conflict have kept much of it beyond reach. So what lies beneath the ziggurat? Mainstream interpretations suggest these chambers may have served as storage rooms, foundation deposits, or ritual spaces. Common features in Mesopotamian temple architecture. Some may have been used to bury offerings meant to consecrate the structure. Others could have been symbolic tombs, designed not for the dead, but for sacred relics and scrolls. But there are details that complicate the narrative. Ancient Assyrian texts speak of hidden rooms of wisdom beneath the temples, repositories of sacred knowledge passed down from divine figures. Some scholars speculate that these chambers may have contained cuneiform tablets detailing astronomical data, healing rituals, or forbidden incantations, knowledge too powerful for public use, safeguarded beneath layers of stone. Other theories, more speculative, look beyond the historical record. Some suggest that the ziggurats functioned as more than just religious monuments. Could their height, geometry, and alignment have had a scientific or even energetic purpose? Were they designed to observe celestial events, to amplify sound, or to harness something not yet understood? And if so, might the chambers beneath Khorsabad contain instruments or mechanisms left behind by ancient engineers whose knowledge was later lost? There are even those who link the ziggurat to older pre-Assyrian traditions. Could it have been built atop a more ancient site, one that predates written history? Satellite imagery of the region has revealed strange anomalies beneath the soil, patterns suggestive of man-made structures deeper than those from the Neo-Assyrian period. Yet no excavations have gone far enough to confirm them. The secrecy surrounding the site has only deepened the mystery. In recent decades, access to Khorsabad has been restricted, and looting during times of war has damaged parts of the ruins. Yet tantalizing fragments continue to emerge, carved lamassu figures with protective inscriptions, strange symbols etched on bricks, hints of tunnels that lead downward, into darkness. What were these chambers meant to contain? And why were they built to be hidden? Perhaps they held state treasures or relics of kings long forgotten. Perhaps they were designed as vaults of memory, rooms where the Assyrian elite stored their most sacred texts, far from the reach of time and conquest. Or perhaps they remain empty, waiting. It is the silence of the Ziggurat that speaks loudest now. With each decade that passes, its ruins settle deeper into the earth, concealing more than they reveal. And while scholars debate and theories multiply, the truth lies sealed beneath layers of stone, just out of reach. What knowledge waits beneath Khorsabad's ancient steps? What secrets were meant to be hidden from the eyes of time? And if we could descend into those forgotten chambers, would we understand what we found? Or would it only deepen the mystery? As we step away from the shadowed substructures of Khorsabad, our attention drifts southeast, toward a stretch of land once dismissed as barren, forgotten by history. But in the arid valleys near the Halil River in southeastern Iran, the earth has begun to whisper another ancient secret. A secret that could rewrite the story of civilization in the Middle East. This is Jiroft, a name once unfamiliar to archaeology, now standing at the edge of one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in ancient history. The landscape here is harsh and sun-baked, dotted with dust-covered farms and low mountains that ripple like frozen waves. Yet buried beneath its soil lies a city older than it should be, filled with tombs, temples, and a language no one has ever read. In 2001, following a period of intense looting in the region, Iranian authorities made a startling discovery. Hundreds of elaborately carved artifacts, many of them looted from grave sites near the ancient mound of Qanar Sandal. These weren't the crude relics of a forgotten backwater. They were sophisticated, beautifully rendered stone vessels, statuettes, and tablets. Some bore motifs familiar from Mesopotamia or Elam. Others were wholly unique. But what caught the world's attention were the carvings, a series of symbols and signs, meticulously arranged on chlorite tablets that bore no resemblance to known writing systems. They were not cuneiform, not Proto-Elamite, not Sumerian or Akkadian. They were something else, something still undeciphered. What culture produced them? And what were they trying to record? Mainstream archaeologists now recognize Jiroft as the center of a once thriving Bronze Age civilization, possibly dating back to as early as 3000 BC, or even earlier. The architectural remains unearthed at Qanar Sandal suggest a complex urban settlement. Citadels, monumental stairways, and intricate floor plans that hint at planning and hierarchy. The people of Jiroft, it seems, were no peripheral tribe. They were builders, artists, and possibly scribes. But that's where the certainty ends. Despite extensive excavations led by Iranian archaeologist Youssef Majidzadeh, the carvings remain a mystery. No bilingual inscriptions have been found. No tablets from neighboring civilizations mention a people called Jiroft. Even the name itself is modern, applied retroactively to a culture whose real name may be lost to time. Some experts have tried to fit the Jiroft script into known frameworks, comparing it to Elamite pictographs or early Indus Valley markings. Others suggest it represents a wholly separate linguistic tradition, an isolated experiment in early writing, now vanished. If that's true, it would make Jiroft one of the world's earliest literate cultures, perhaps even older than the Sumerians of Uruk. But if they had writing, where are their records? Where are the archives, the clay tablets, the scrolls? Only fragments have surfaced. Most were looted. Some are rumored to have disappeared into private collections. Others lie in museum storage, unstudied. The few inscriptions that remain accessible to scholars are too short, too disjointed to crack the code. Then there's the matter of the symbols themselves. Some resemble plants or animals, stylized forms that suggest a connection to the natural world. Others are geometric, Intersecting lines, repeated motifs, seemingly organized patterns. Are they phonetic signs, religious symbols, an early form of accounting, or something more abstract, cosmic even? More speculative theories drift in from the fringes. Some have noted that Jiroft's iconography often features mythical beasts, composite creatures with wings, serpentine bodies, or horned heads. Were these purely decorative, or did they represent a belief system now lost? Did the Jiroft culture possess an oral tradition preserved through symbol rather than syllable? Others ask a deeper question. Could Jiroft have been part of a forgotten network, one that connected Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and even early Egypt? Trade goods found in Jiroft suggest far-reaching connections. Lapis lazuli, marine shells, and tin, all materials not native to the region, hint at extensive interaction. If this was a crossroads of civilizations, might its script encode messages meant to bridge cultures? Might its symbols carry more than linguistic value, perhaps sacred or mathematical knowledge? Some theorists go further still, proposing that Jiroft represents not just a local culture, but a remnant of something older, a mother civilization whose knowledge seeded the great empires to come. While mainstream historians remain cautious, the lack of context leaves the door open. Without more data, all possibilities, however cautious or ambitious, remain suspended in the realm of the unknown. For now, the undeciphered carvings of Jiroft remain silent. We have their shapes, their surfaces, the feel of their grooves under modern fingertips. But the meaning, the voice behind the stone, escapes us. It's as though we've found a language carved into time itself, but lost the key to listen. What did the people of Jiroft want us to know? What stories, prayers, or laws lie encoded in these symbols? Were they meant for human eyes at all, or part of rituals that only the initiated could interpret? Perhaps somewhere, buried beneath layers of time and soil, the answer waits in a sealed chamber, or in the heart of a stolen tablet, tucked away in a private vault. Until then, the script of Jiroft remains a riddle without a reader. A message cast into the silence of deep history, still waiting, still unread. As the mystery of Jiroft's unreadable script lingers in silence, our path now winds southwest toward the shifting marshlands of southern Iraq. Here, where the Tigris and Euphrates spill into a patchwork of reeds, canals, and floodplains, lies one of the oldest names in recorded history: Eridu. To stand here today is to witness quiet desolation. The land, once lush with river-fed life, is now marked by low mounds of crumbling mud brick, scattered pottery shards, and the bleached outlines of foundations long abandoned. The sun beats down over the ruins, and a faint breeze rustles the reeds. There is little to suggest that this forgotten place was once considered the very first city in the world. According to Sumerian texts, Eridu was the city where kingship first descended from heaven. It was the sacred seat of Enki, god of water, wisdom, and creation. The Sumerians believed it was here that human civilization began, a divine gift bestowed upon mankind through rituals and structure. And for generations, this belief endured. Archaeologically, Eridu is real. Excavated since the 1940s, its stratified mounds have revealed over 18 successive temple foundations, each built atop the ruins of the previous, dating back to at least 5400 BC. These layers form the ancient Ziggurat complex dedicated to Enki, a monumental platform that once rose above the marshes, marking a center of worship and early state formation. But beneath these known ruins, something more may lie hidden. Beneath the foundational layers of Eridu's Temple Mound, archaeologists have noted unusual patterns. structural anomalies detected through ground-penetrating radar and limited excavations. Some suggest the presence of voids or passageways deeper than the oldest dated levels. Others propose that beneath the temple's base lies not bedrock, but older architecture, fragments of a city even more ancient than the one history records. Could Eridu have been built atop an even older settlement? One lost to time or erased by rising waters and millennia of rebuilding? This question has long haunted scholars of the ancient Near East. The southern Mesopotamian plain has always been dynamic, reshaped by floods, sediment deposits, and the slow migration of river courses. Entire settlements could be buried under silt and marsh, preserved in anaerobic silence. And Eridu, situated near the edge of what was once the Persian Gulf, may have once looked out over an entirely different landscape, lush, fertile, and bustling with life. Sumerian texts hint at earlier ages. The Sumerian king list, a cuneiform document tracing dynasties before the known kings of Ur and Lagash, speaks of rulers from Eridu who reigned for thousands of years. Some names are said to have ruled before the Great Flood, antediluvian kings whose reigns defy explanation. Are these merely mythological placeholders, or encoded memories of real forgotten dynasties? Mainstream scholars interpret these accounts as metaphor, mythic exaggerations meant to legitimize later rulers or connect them to divine origins. But the persistence of the narrative raises deeper questions. Why Eridu? Why not Uruk, or Nippur, or Lagash? Why does every early text place such extraordinary emphasis on this particular site? And then there is the issue of technology. Artifacts recovered from the lowest layers of Eridu suggest a degree of advancement unexpected for their age. Finely crafted pottery, architectural planning, irrigation channels, all dating back to the Ubaid period, before cities as we know them existed. Some have noted the sudden emergence of cultural complexity at Eridu, as if civilization appeared here fully formed, rather than gradually developed. This has led to more speculative theories. Could Eridu have been the surviving remnant of a much older, unknown civilization? A civilization destroyed, perhaps by rising sea levels, internal collapse, or cosmic catastrophe, and rebuilt atop its own ashes? Was the earliest temple constructed not as a beginning, but as a remembrance? Some researchers, operating on the fringes of accepted history, connect Eridu to global flood myths, not just those of Mesopotamia, but of the Hebrew Bible, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and other ancient traditions. They point to the repeated motif, a great flood, a loss of knowledge, and a sacred city that predates it all. In this telling, Eridu becomes more than just a city. It becomes a portal to a forgotten age, an axis between the known and the unknowable. The voids beneath the temple take on new meaning. Are they tombs, storage rooms, or perhaps repositories, chambers built to guard something precious, something dangerous, or something sacred? Thus far, no full-scale excavation has dared to go deep enough. The site is fragile, politically sensitive, and threatened by both time and looting. Most of what lies below remains untouched. And so, the questions linger. If Eridu is the first city, was it built from scratch, or upon something even more ancient? If the gods once walked here, as the texts claim, were they merely kings and priests, or something more enigmatic? And if there is a forgotten city beneath Eridu, buried deep in mud and myth, what stories would it tell? For now, the ruins remain silent. The earth holds its breath, and the past, it seems, is not yet finished with us. As the mystery of Eridu sinks beneath the silence of mud brick and memory, we now journey north toward the ancient plains of northeastern Syria. Here, in a desolate landscape where the horizon stretches endlessly beneath pale skies, a lone mound rises above the emptiness. It is weathered and sun-baked, silent save for the occasional whisper of desert wind across stone and dust. This is Tel Brak, one of the oldest urban centers in the ancient Near East. But buried within this ancient tell lies something far more perplexing than its sprawling ruins or monumental walls. Something small, strange, and still not fully understood. They call it the Eye Temple. Unearthed in the 1930s and again in more detail in the late 20th century, the Eye Temple of Tel Brak dates back to the 4th millennium BC, a time before writing had fully emerged, before Sumerian cities began their rise, and long before kings carved their names in stone. It was a temple, yes, but one unlike any other found in the region. Its architecture was modest in size but remarkably complex for the time. Thick walls, plastered floors, burnt offerings, and altars revealed a place of ritual. But it was not the structure itself that puzzled archaeologists. It was what lay inside. Scattered across the floors and deposited in deliberate layers were thousands, literally thousands, of small alabaster figurines, each one no more than a few inches tall, each one carved with a striking and unmistakable feature: large, exaggerated eyes. Some have a single pair of eyes. Others are stacked with 2 or even 3 pairs, creating a strange totemic effect. A few seem to wear headdresses or robes. Some appear alone. Others are in pairs or small groups. But all of them stare forward, their eyes wide, blank, and unblinking. Why? What do these figures represent? Who or what were they meant to honor? Mainstream scholars initially interpreted them as votive offerings, ritual gifts left by worshippers in hope of divine favor. In this view, the eyes symbolize watchfulness, piety, or the gaze of the gods. They may have represented the worshippers themselves, rendered in stylized form as permanent stand-ins before the deity. But even as this theory gained traction, deeper questions emerged. Why are there so many? Why the obsessive repetition of the same feature? And why does this visual motif, eyes without mouths, without movement, without expression, persist so consistently across centuries and layers? Some scholars have suggested that these figures might represent a deity rather than the worshippers. Was there once a forgotten goddess or god, now erased from the historical record, whose very identity was associated with vision, awareness, or surveillance? Was this a god of justice? Or perhaps a guardian spirit meant to watch over the community from beyond the veil? Others have proposed that the temple and its figures served a protective function, invoking supernatural observation in a time of growing urban complexity and social tension. In this telling, the eyes were not just symbolic, but magical, meant to see what humans could not. A wall of unseen watchers guarding the city's spiritual boundary. Then there are the more speculative interpretations. Some fringe researchers have drawn attention to the figures' strange proportions, noting their oddly humanoid yet abstract forms. Could they represent mythic beings or ancestral spirits, non-human entities described in oral traditions that never made it into cuneiform? Others, noting the uniformity and sheer volume of the figurines, have posited an early form of mass religious behavior, what might be called a pre-state ideology, encoded in shared symbols long before empires and writing. And then, inevitably, there are the deeper, stranger questions. Why do similar eye motifs appear in other parts of the ancient world? Some point to parallel imagery in Egypt, the Indus Valley, or even Neolithic Anatolia. Is it coincidence? Convergent symbolism? Or were early human societies sharing more than we assume? Ideas, myths, even deities, passed from one forgotten culture to the next? There are even theories, far from the academic mainstream, that tie the eye temple to early astronomical cults, suggesting the eyes represent celestial observation. watchers of the heavens tracking cycles of stars, planets, or eclipses. Were these figures part of a long-lost cosmology? A ritual language designed not for prayer, but for calculation? What remains undeniably striking is the emotional response the figurines evoke. To gaze upon them, row after row, thousands upon thousands, is to feel something uncanny. They seem frozen in a state of permanent witness, eyes locked in silent attention across 5,000 years of dust and decay. And yet, they offer no answers, no texts, no inscriptions, no context beyond their own haunting repetition. Today, many of the Eye Temple's figurines reside in museum collections, far from their place of origin. Some have been damaged, others lost to looting or war. The temple itself, fragile and partially reconstructed, is now at risk, caught in the crosswinds of modern conflict. Its past continues to slip away, even as we struggle to interpret what little we still possess. What did the people of Tel Brak believe? What power did they invest in these tiny, unblinking forms? Were they symbols of reverence or of fear? A collective gesture of devotion, or a warning passed down in clay? And most haunting of all, were the eyes watching only from the walls of the temple? Or were they meant to watch us too? The enigma of the Eye Temple remains, silent, still, and watching. As we leave the staring idols of Tel Brak behind, watchful, silent, and unknowable, our journey shifts westward across deserts ancient and vast. Here, in the southern reaches of Egypt's western desert, on a windswept plateau surrounded by nothing but open sky and shifting dunes, stands one of the most overlooked enigmas of prehistoric science. This is Nabta Playa, a remote, desolate basin located nearly 500 miles south of modern-day Cairo. For most of the year, it is arid and lifeless, a place where survival seems impossible. But long before the rise of the pharaohs or the great temples of the Nile, this landscape held water, and where water flowed, people gathered. Sometime between 6000 and 3400 BC, nomadic groups began to settle intermittently around this seasonal lake. They built hearths, dug wells, and left behind a wealth of stone tools and pottery. But buried among these signs of early habitation, archaeologists discovered something far more curious. Arrangements of massive stones, some weighing several tons, deliberately placed, precisely aligned, and pointing toward the stars. These structures, modest in appearance but staggering in implication, have since become the focus of decades of study. The most iconic among them is a stone circle, often compared to a smaller, older version of Stonehenge, consisting of vertical slabs set into the ground and aligned with celestial markers. This, it seems, was not a mere gathering place. It was a prehistoric observatory. So how could a nomadic people, without writing, without cities, without metal tools, create a complex astronomical calendar in the middle of the Sahara? Mainstream archaeologists agree. The stone alignments at Nabta Playa appear to track key celestial events. Some slabs are positioned to mark the summer solstice, aligning with the rising of the sun at its northernmost point. Others may correspond to the movements of bright stars, such as Orion's belt or Sirius, celestial bodies of great importance in later Egyptian cosmology. This raises a fascinating possibility. Was Nabta Playa an early prototype of the religious and scientific ideas that would later blossom along the Nile? Some Egyptologists believe so. They argue that Nabta's early sky watchers may have laid the foundation for what became the Egyptian calendar, star cults, and even the mythological alignment of pyramids with Orion and other constellations. In this view, Nabta Playa is not isolated but transitional, a crucial link in the evolution of Egyptian civilization. But here, the mystery deepens. The precision of these alignments, some accurate to within a fraction of a degree, suggests long-term observation and planning. Not the random efforts of a few stargazers, but generations of accumulated knowledge. Knowledge that required measuring time not in days or seasons, but in centuries. How did they achieve this? Without writing? Without instruments? And more curiously, why? This was not a temple in a fertile valley or a city center bustling with activity. This was the edge of human habitation, a harsh environment even during its wetter periods. Yet the stones were hauled, shaped, and erected with care and intention. What significance did the stars hold here, on the edge of the known world? Some scholars have proposed that Nabta Playa was a pilgrimage site, a kind of ceremonial ground visited only at specific times of year, perhaps when the rains returned or when the sky signaled the changing of seasons. Others suggest it was a sacred calendar, used to mark the arrival of Sirius and predict the annual flooding of the Nile far to the north, a cycle vital to early agriculture. But then there are theories that stretch further, into territory less comfortable but no less compelling. Could the site have served as a cosmological model, reflecting not just the visible sky, but a mythic or spiritual order? Some researchers have noted that the layout of certain stones may correspond to constellations or even represent a map of the heavens. Were these stones not just markers, but symbols, each one echoing a story, a god, a star? A few have gone further still, questioning whether Nabta Playa may represent a lost branch of human knowledge, a system of proto-astronomy or ancient cosmology developed independently and then forgotten. The absence of writing, the limited archaeological remains, and the remoteness of the site make it difficult to trace cultural continuity. And yet, the stones remain. Weathered, silent, aligned. Could it be that Nabta Playa was more than a calendar? Was it an early observatory shrine where science and spirit met beneath the desert sky? Or was it something even more enigmatic, a gathering place for rites and rituals whose meaning is now beyond reach? The lack of definitive artifacts, no large-scale settlements, no written texts, no clear evidence of a permanent priesthood, leaves us with more questions than answers. The alignments are real. The craftsmanship is real. But the purpose remains shrouded in speculation. Was it memory encoded in stone? A celestial key passed from generation to generation? Or was Nabta Playa one of many now lost nodes in a network of ancient skywatchers? Peoples whose gaze extended beyond the horizon into the depths of time. We may never know. Today, the stones of Nabta Playa still stand under the same stars they once marked. The wind howls across the empty basin, shifting grains of sand that have buried secrets for millennia. As the sun sets over the shifting sands of the Nabta Playa, casting long shadows over its ancient alignments, we move north and west, into the rugged highlands and silent wadis of what is now southern Jordan and northwestern Arabia. Here, nestled within sandstone cliffs that burn red in the afternoon light, lies one of the Middle East's most iconic ancient cities, Petra, the rose-red city half as old as time. Carved into living rock by the Nabataeans over 2,000 years ago, Petra was once a thriving capital, a hub of commerce and culture, where incense caravans from Arabia met Roman traders from the Mediterranean. Its monumental facades, graves, temples, tombs, bear witness to the artistic and architectural brilliance of this lost kingdom. But for all its visual grandeur, Petra holds another, quieter mystery, not one of stone, but of words. This is the mystery of the Nabataean script, a language once etched into cliff faces, pottery shards, and temple walls across a vast swath of territory, and then, almost inexplicably, vanished. The Nabataeans were not a minor people. From roughly the 4th century BC to the 2nd century AD, they dominated key trade routes stretching from Damascus to the Red Sea. They built cities, minted coins, and negotiated with empires. And yet, their written script, once a vibrant and evolving form of Aramaic, disappears from history with a strange abruptness. We have thousands of Nabataean inscriptions. Many are short and formulaic, names, dedications, tomb markers. A few are longer, religious in tone, administrative in content, but the corpus is limited. Curiously, these inscriptions appear across a wide geography: Jordan, Syria, the Negev, northern Arabia. The script is graceful, curved, and flowing, an early forerunner of Arabic, with letter forms that seem to lean forward, as if in motion. But by the 4th century AD, the script is gone, replaced, superseded not gradually, but suddenly. How could a script used by an entire people, spread over vast distances and thriving for centuries, disappear without clear transition? Mainstream scholars offer one explanation: that Nabataean evolved directly into Arabic script. Indeed, when one traces the letter forms across time, a visible progression emerges. The sweeping ligatures, the joining of characters, the simplification of strokes, all suggest a natural linguistic evolution. From this perspective, the disappearance of Nabataean was not an end, but a transformation, its DNA living on in the script of the Quran and the Arabic language we know today. But that explanation, while elegant, is not complete, because there remains a gap, a historical silence between the last Nabataean inscriptions and the first fully formed Arabic texts. A period of at least a century or more in which writing seems to vanish from the archaeological record across much of the region. Why? Some historians point to shifting political tides. After being absorbed into the Roman Empire in 106 AD, the Nabataeans lost their autonomy. Their cities slowly declined, and their cultural identity may have been gradually absorbed into surrounding Arab tribes. In this telling, the script faded as the people who used it were assimilated, but that still leaves a question unanswered. Why would a literate society abandon its writing system entirely, only to see a related form re-emerge generations later? Was the script actively repressed? Was it tied too closely to a religious or political identity that later powers sought to erase? Or was it a casualty of oral tradition, a society where speech was favored over text, where knowledge was passed through poetry and memory rather than ink and stone? Others take a more speculative view. Some have suggested that much of the Nabataean script, its longer texts, administrative records, perhaps even its literature, was never carved into stone, but written on papyrus, parchment, or wood, materials long since lost to time. If true, then what we've found may represent only a tiny fraction of the written record, scraps of a much larger intellectual tradition that perished with the elements. In this theory, Nabataean writing didn't vanish, it simply decayed, leaving only its stone remnants behind. Still others have noted an oddity, that the Nabataean inscriptions show little internal variety. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs or Akkadian cuneiform, which reflect bureaucratic systems, literary works, and evolving dialects, Nabataean writing remains surprisingly uniform. Was it ceremonial, reserved only for the elite or for specific religious contexts? Could its use have been deliberately limited, part of a cultural code now lost to us? Then there are the fringe ideas, rarely accepted in academic circles, but nonetheless persistent. Some propose that the Nabataean script, and the culture behind it, was tied to esoteric knowledge, veiled through symbols and sacred geometry embedded in Petra's architecture. They suggest the writing may have been more than phonetic, perhaps incorporating lost numerologies or codes not yet deciphered. Others wonder if entire layers of meaning were hidden from the casual observer, guarded by a priestly class, meant to be read only by the initiated. There's no concrete evidence for such theories. But the gaps in the record, the abruptness of the disappearance, and the sheer beauty of the script itself leave space for wonder. Today, the last echoes of the Nabataean script survive not in its own form, but in the graceful loops and curves of Arabic, a legacy half seen, half remembered, carved high into cliffs where no eye now gazes, whispered on eroding gravestones few can still read. So we're left to ask, how much did the Nabataeans write? What stories have we lost? What histories, poems, philosophies now crumbled to dust? And if, somewhere, a hidden cave or sealed library still holds the final chapters of this forgotten script, will we be able to read what they left behind? As the final echoes of the Nabataean script fade into stone and sand, we turn southeast, toward the desolate ridgelines and dry wadis of Oman's Dhofar Mountains. Here, in the sweltering expanse between the shifting sands of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, and the turquoise waters of the Arabian Sea, lies a landscape both forbidding and strangely alluring. The rocks here are ancient, scorched by the sun, fractured by wind, and silent. But deep within this dry and seemingly barren wilderness, a legend lingers. A story that has outlasted empires, faded from scripture into shadow. It speaks of gold, of riches, and of a king so powerful, his name became myth. This is the mystery of the lost mines of King Solomon. The story begins in the Bible, in the first book of Kings, where Solomon, the wise and wealthy king of Israel, is said to have received shipments of gold, silver, precious stones, and exotic animals from a place known only as Ophir. Every 3 years, fleets returned from this distant land bearing vast treasures, enough to line the walls of his temple and fund a kingdom whose opulence became the stuff of legend. But where was Ophir? And more importantly, where did all that gold come from? For centuries, scholars, explorers, and treasure hunters have speculated wildly. Ethiopia, India, Zimbabwe, even the Philippines have been suggested. But in recent decades, a quieter, more plausible theory has emerged. One rooted not in fantasy, but in archaeology. Oman. More specifically, the southern highlands near Qasr and the ancient copper-rich region of al-Batina. Here, just beyond the reach of most tourists and travelers, lies evidence of prehistoric mining activity, vast slag heaps, ancient smelting sites, and underground tunnels carved deep into iron-red stone. The region's mineral wealth is no secret. Oman's copper exports date back to at least 3000 BC, and early civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley are known to have imported metal from this peninsula. But could Oman's mines also have produced gold? In the late 20th century, satellite imagery revealed strange geological formations and caravan trails converging near the remote site of Ubar, sometimes referred to in local lore as Iram of the Pillars, a city linked in some traditions to wealth and divine punishment. Excavations suggested the area may once have been a center of trade, drawing in frankincense, minerals, and other resources from across the Arabian interior. Nearby, researchers uncovered what appeared to be ancient mining shafts, deep vertical pits, many now filled with debris and sand, their original purpose unclear. Some yielded traces of copper. Others, intriguingly, were found in areas rich with quartz veins, rock formations commonly associated with the presence of gold. And so the question arises, could this be the source of Solomon's legendary wealth? Were these forgotten tunnels once worked by miners laboring in extreme heat, pulling treasure from the earth to be carried northward along secret caravan routes? The theory is compelling, but far from proven. No inscription directly links these mines to Ophir. no artifact bearing Solomon's name has been found in Oman. And yet, the pieces, while scattered, seem to hint at a deeper story. Arab oral traditions speak of vast ancient wealth hidden in the southern deserts. Gold hidden by the ancients, buried in mountains that speak at night, or watched over by jinn. Medieval Islamic geographers like al-Idrisi and al-Muqaddasi described a land in southern Arabia abundant in resources, from frankincense to rare stones. Some even hinted at a place called Afar or Ofar, phonetically similar to Ophir, located near the southern coast. Coincidence? Or echoes of a lost name? More fringe theories have emerged as well. Some suggest that the mines were part of a vast ancient network that spanned the Red Sea and the Arabian Peninsula, hidden trading hubs predating even the rise of the Sabaeans or Himyarites. Others imagine a more mystical layer, that the wealth of Solomon was not simply gold, but knowledge, technological or astronomical wisdom preserved in coded form, passed from civilization to civilization along these desert routes. And what of the mines themselves? In some cases, their purpose remains unclear. Unusual tool marks, collapsed chambers, and slag heaps of uncertain date challenge conventional dating methods. Could older layers remain, sealed below more recent activity? Have we only scratched the surface, both literally and figuratively, of what lies beneath Oman's rocky hills? What's more, modern exploration has been slow. Political, environmental, and logistical constraints have kept many potential sites off limits to large-scale excavation. What might still lie beneath the sand, waiting for the right storm or sensor to reveal it? Today, the desert continues to whisper. At night, the stars cast long shadows over the same paths once walked by ancient caravans. The stones hold their silence, the tunnels their secrets. No definitive evidence ties these mines to Solomon, but no one can quite dismiss the possibility either. Was Ophir truly in Oman? Did the gold of a biblical king come from these forgotten hills? Or is this simply one more illusion, born of legend, longing, and desert mirage? Somewhere beneath the dust and time, the answer may still be buried. As the winds drift through the ancient valleys of Oman's copper-bearing highlands, where stories of Solomon's mines still shimmer in the heat, our gaze turns to an even older enigma, one whispered in clay tablets, etched in forgotten names, and half buried beneath layers of desert stone. We move east toward the shores of the Arabian Sea, where barren coastal plains give way to jagged mountains and lowland estuaries. The air is thick with salt and dust. The land seems empty now, but thousands of years ago, this region may have cradled a kingdom that once traded with the mightiest empires of the ancient world. Its name was Magan. To the Sumerians of Mesopotamia, who etched their records into tablets as early as the 3rd millennium BC, Magan was both real and vital. It was the source of copper, stone, and precious goods, a place rich in resources, skilled in shipbuilding, and capable of standing toe-to-toe with the powers of Sumer and Elam. In one royal inscription, King Naram-Sin of Akkad boasts of defeating Magan's ruler, a title rendered in cuneiform as Malua Magan, or the Lord of Magan. But despite these vivid mentions in Sumerian and Akkadian texts, no definitive capital, no clear royal archive, no city of Magan has ever been found. How can a kingdom so frequently referenced in the written records of its neighbors remain archaeologically invisible? Over the past century, researchers have looked to the southeastern Arabian Peninsula for answers, and many have come to believe that Magan once thrived within the modern borders of Oman and the United Arab Emirates. The evidence is persuasive. Large-scale copper mining at sites like Lusail and Al Ain, along with early trade ports on the coast, such as Ras al-Jins, suggest a culture capable of supplying Mesopotamia with the resources it needed. At Bat, a UNESCO World Heritage Site in northern Oman, rows of beehive-shaped tombs dating to the 3rd millennium BC rise from the desert floor. Nearby, evidence of settlement, trade, and metal production suggests a sophisticated society, perhaps part of Magan's broader cultural sphere. Yet still, no palace, no royal name inscribed in local stone, no temple bearing the symbol of a Maganite god. No single site has revealed itself as the undisputed heart of this lost kingdom. So where did Magan go? One theory suggests that Magan was never centralized in the way Mesopotamian city-states were. Rather than a kingdom with a capital and bureaucracy, Magan may have been a network of allied tribal centers, loosely organized and culturally aligned, thriving on maritime trade and resource extraction. In this view, its legacy is scattered across many sites, never buried in one place, but hidden in plain sight. Others propose that Magan's disappearance was the result of environmental collapse. The region's fragile climate, vulnerable to drought and salinization, may have led to the abandonment of key settlements. Trade routes shifted, ore deposits depleted, and what was once a name known to kings slowly faded from use. But there are deeper mysteries, too. Some researchers have noted the linguistic ambiguity surrounding Magan. The term may not have referred to a single fixed territory, but to a broader zone known for certain products or skills, much like how Phoenicia or Scythia were used by later cultures. Could Magan have been a conceptual geography, defined by trade patterns rather than borders? Or could it have moved? In later texts, especially those from the Persian and Hellenistic periods, regions once associated with Magan are referred to by other names: Makan, Makan, even Omanu. Some believe these are linguistic descendants of the same root, evidence of a name evolving over time, shifting with political power and changing dialects. But if that's true, why does the archaeological record remain so elusive? There are even more speculative ideas. A few fringe historians have posited that Magan's true center lies offshore, perhaps beneath now submerged coastal plains lost to post-Ice Age sea level rise. The Indian Ocean was once lower, and parts of today's shallow coastline could have hosted ports, towns, or ritual sites now beneath the waves. Could Magan's greatest cities be lying under silt and salt water, waiting to be discovered? Others connect Magan with distant civilizations through maritime links. The Indus Valley, for instance, traded extensively with Mesopotamia around the same time Magan flourished. Some suggest that Magan was not merely a middleman, but a cultural bridge, its ships ferrying not just goods, but ideas and technologies between India and the Fertile Crescent. If true, this would place Magan at the crossroads of ancient globalization, a forgotten engine of innovation. Then, there is the question of memory. Why did the name Magan vanish so completely from later texts? If the culture evolved, why did it not preserve its own name, its own mythos, its own heroes? Could it be that Magan was not conquered, but willingly dissolved? Its identity absorbed into the rising tide of new powers, new religions, new languages? Or was it deliberately erased? Some point to the Akkadian conquest of Magan under Naram Sin as a potential turning point. His inscriptions boast not just of victory, but of humiliation, possibly the kind of defeat that dismantles a cultural identity entirely. Was Magan wiped from the record, its cities burned or scattered, its language and symbols destroyed? We don't know. And that, perhaps, is the most haunting truth of all. Magan remains both everywhere and nowhere, a name carved into clay thousands of miles away, yet still missing its own voice. What lies beneath the desert floors of Oman, beneath the sun-blasted wadis and the dunes that shift with each season? Could the next layer of excavation, the next buried tablet, finally reveal the heartbeat of this forgotten kingdom? Or will Magan remain, a kingdom remembered only by those who never set foot in it? As the sun rises over the jagged cliffs of southeastern Iran, casting golden light across the crumbling tombs of long-forgotten kings, the legacy of Magan begins to fade behind us, its memory scattered in the wind, its silence stretching across centuries. Now, we journey northward, into the heart of the Iranian plateau, where stone outcrops bear witness to another ancient mystery, one that burned not only in stone temples, but in the hearts of its worshippers. Here, scattered across rugged highlands, nestled in mountain valleys, and carved into dry hillsides, we find the fire temples of ancient Persia, solemn, enigmatic places once home to a flame that, according to tradition, was never meant to die. Many of these temples are ruins now. Time and weather have chipped away at their once grand facades. Wind howls through abandoned chambers, and the scent of ash and incense is long gone. But some still stand. In Yazd, in Naqsh-e-Rostam, in the sacred remains of Takht-e Soleiman, the echoes remain, traces of a spiritual world built on purity, discipline, and eternal fire. But what truly was the purpose of these fire temples, and how far back does their story go? The mainstream narrative begins with Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest known monotheistic religions, traditionally attributed to the prophet Zarathustra, or Zoroaster, who may have lived sometime between 1200 and 600 BC. Zoroastrianism became the state religion of the powerful Achaemenid Empire, and later the Sasanian dynasty. Central to its theology was the battle between order, Asha, and chaos, Druj, light and darkness, truth and falsehood. Fire, seen as the purest element, became a symbol of divine presence, an eternal witness to both human deeds and cosmic order. Thus, the fire temples, or Atashkadeh, became sacred spaces where flames were kept alive by priestly hands, protected from corruption by wind, water, or decay. Each fire was not worshipped but revered, tended day and night as a living connection to Ahura Mazda, the supreme deity. This is the official history. But look closer, and the story begins to grow more complex. Some of the oldest fire temple sites predate the Sasanian era by centuries. Structures like those found at Chak-Chak, a mountainside pilgrimage site east of Yazd, or the enigmatic circular platforms of Maymand, hint at fire rituals long before Zoroastrianism became formalized. Could these have belonged to pre-Zoroastrian cults, now lost to history? Or were they absorbed into the emerging religious framework, older practices reshaped, reinterpreted? At Takht-e Soleiman, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, archaeologists uncovered layers of construction beneath the famous fire temple. Beneath Sasanian brickwork lie foundations from earlier dynasties, Median, Achaemenid, perhaps even older. Could the sacred fire have burned continuously across dynasties, faiths, and empires, changing hands but never extinguished? And what of the fire itself? Zoroastrian tradition describes three primary grades of fire: the Atash Dadga, used for basic rituals, the Atash Adaran of intermediate sanctity, and the Atash Beram, or fire of victory, the holiest of flames, requiring the fusion of 16 different types of fire, from lightning, from a cremation pyre, from molten metal, from a baker's hearth. Each must be ritually purified and then combined, an elaborate process taking years to complete. But how did ancient priests acquire such fires? How were they preserved through war, exile, and invasion? There are tales, passed down in priestly lineages, of sacred fires being carried across deserts, hidden in mountain caves, or even spirited away across oceans to preserve them from enemies. One such fire, the Iransha Atash Beram, is said to have been brought to India by Zoroastrian refugees after the fall of the Sasanian Empire, where it still burns in the town of Udvada today. This persistence is remarkable. But it also raises questions. What is the origin of this fire symbolism? Why was fire chosen above all other elements as the vessel of divine truth? Some scholars believe the answer lies in Indo-Iranian roots. Ancient Indo-European-speaking tribes who migrated into the Iranian plateau may have shared religious traditions that linked fire with law, sacrifice, and cosmic order. In the Rig Veda, sacred fire, Agni, is both a god and a messenger, carrying prayers to the heavens. Is Zoroastrian fire worship a continuation of this primordial legacy? Or did it evolve separately, shaped by Persia's harsh environment and the symbolism of light and darkness? There are other, stranger ideas too. A few fringe theorists have proposed that the earliest fire temples may have been natural gas seeps, flames that emerged spontaneously from the earth, burning for centuries without human intervention. Sites like Yanar Dag in modern Azerbaijan still show how such phenomena occur. Were early Persians awed by such eternal flames, interpreting them as signs from the divine? Could the very concept of sacred fire have originated from the geology of the land itself? Others point to the architectural symbolism of fire temples. Many are built with precise orientation toward sunrise or cardinal points, suggesting not only ritual significance, but astronomical awareness. Could these temples also have functioned as calendrical markers, their flames aligning with solstices or equinoxes? Then, there's the absence of clear documentation. Unlike the meticulous records of Babylon or the annals of Egypt, Persia's early fire temples left little writing behind. Much of what we know comes from later texts, compiled during or after the Islamic conquest, centuries after Zoroastrianism's decline. Is this gap merely a loss of material over time? Or was there an oral tradition so strong that writing was deemed unnecessary, or even inappropriate, within sacred precincts? Today, the few remaining fire temples still burn quietly in Iran and India. Their fires flicker behind glass, attended by white-robed priests, separated from the modern world by thresholds few outsiders cross. But the ruins of their predecessors, now open to sky and time, invite deeper questions. How many more fire temples lie buried beneath the earth, unrecognized or misidentified? How many flames once burned where we now see only dust and stone? And perhaps more intriguingly, did these fires once illuminate something more than belief? Something we have yet to rediscover? As we leave behind the glowing embers of the fire temples, flames that once symbolized the sacred order of the cosmos, we turn now toward a different kind of mystery, one not built of light and ritual, but of power, politics, and sudden silence. Beyond the Euphrates, on the arid plains of present-day southern Iraq, the ruins of Al-Hira lie quietly beneath layers of earth and history. Once a flourishing cultural hub, its name is barely known outside the circles of scholars. But 15 centuries ago, Al-Hira stood as the glittering capital of a kingdom that shaped Arab identity before Islam, the Lakhmid kingdom. And then, it vanished. The disappearance of the Lakhmids is not just a footnote in Middle Eastern history. It is an unresolved story that blends diplomacy, betrayal, and cultural fragmentation. A kingdom that thrived on the edge of empires, and then abruptly fell from view. What happened to the Lakhmids, and why has their memory faded so completely? The story begins in the 3rd century AD. The Lakhmids were an Arab dynasty of Christian kings, descendants, according to tradition, of the legendary Lakhm tribe from Yemen. They established their rule in Al-Hira, along key trade routes connecting the Arabian Peninsula to the Persian Empire. From this strategic location, they served as a buffer state for the Sasanian Empire, shielding Persia's western frontier from incursions by nomadic Arab tribes and rival powers allied with Rome or Byzantium. For nearly 3 centuries, the Lakhmids thrived under Persian patronage. They became known for their courtly culture, religious diversity, and literary sophistication. Al-Hira was a city of poets and philosophers, of skilled architects and Christian monasteries. Its kings, such as the famed Al-Nu'man III Ibn al-Mundir, held lavish courts, wore Persian robes, and walked a political tightrope between loyalty and autonomy. But in 602 AD, everything changed. The Persian king Khosrow II suddenly deposed Al-Nu'man III and abolished the Lakhmid monarchy altogether. Persian troops were sent in. The city was sacked. The kingdom, once a proud Arab ally of Persia, ceased to exist. Officially, the reasons given were political. Al-Nu'man was accused of disloyalty, of plotting against the Sasanian throne. Some say he refused to marry his daughter to Khosrow. Others claim he was hiding arms or aligning with Byzantine interests. Whatever the cause, the Persian response was swift and final. But scholars have long questioned the abruptness of this collapse. Why would Khosrow dismantle a loyal buffer kingdom on the eve of war with Byzantium? Why remove the very ally who had long defended his southern flank? And why did no successor state arise in Al-Hira's place? Some historians suggest the move was part of a broader strategy, an attempt to consolidate direct Persian control over frontier regions. Yet others believe Khosrow's actions were driven by personal mistrust, or perhaps pressure from rival Arab tribes aligned with Persia's enemies. The result, however, was disastrous. Without the Lakhmids as a stabilizing force, Persia's southern border was exposed. Just a few years later, in 611 AD, Byzantine forces swept through the Levant. Within a generation, the Islamic conquests would dismantle both Persian and Byzantine rule across the region. Could the fall of the Lakhmids have accelerated the downfall of 2 great empires? There are even stranger elements to the story. Despite their long rule, the Lakhmids left behind very little in the way of inscriptions or monumental architecture. Unlike their Ghassanid cousins, Arab allies of Byzantium who built churches and forts across Syria, the Lakhmids' physical legacy is elusive. Some ruins near Najaf and Al-Kufa are thought to be remnants of Al-Hira, but definitive identifications remain debated. Why is the archaeological footprint of such a prominent kingdom so faint? Some propose that the Lakhmids built primarily with perishable materials, mud brick, wood, textiles, and that the fierce desert climate erased their structures over time. Others suggest that Islamic expansion, which followed closely on their demise, may have repurposed or overwritten their cultural footprint. And yet, fragments remain. Christian texts, written in Syriac, speak of Al-Hira's monastic life. Arab poets, centuries later, still invoke the elegance of its vanished courts. The memory of Lakhmid kings survives in both Islamic and pre-Islamic poetry, suggesting a legacy that, while physically ephemeral, was spiritually enduring. Still, questions persist. Why did Khosrow truly turn on Al-Nu'man? Were religious tensions at play, Zoroastrianism versus Christianity? Could internal Lakhmid divisions have weakened the kingdom from within? Was the fall of the Lakhmids a deliberate erasure, a political act meant to remove a culturally independent Arab presence from Persia's orbit? And more speculatively, did something deeper occur? Some fringe theories suggest that the Lakhmids, with their cultural ties to both Arab traditions and Christian doctrine, held theological or philosophical texts deemed dangerous or heretical, possibly triggering a suppression of their legacy. Others wonder if their sudden disappearance masks an unrecorded migration, a scattering of the elite to distant lands. their knowledge hidden in monasteries or assimilated into early Islamic schools. These ideas remain unproven, yet the silence surrounding the Lakhmids is almost as striking as their brief prominence. A kingdom that stood at the crossroads of Arab, Persian, and Christian worlds, now remembered only in fragments. No royal tombs, no palaces, no chronicles of their final days, just scattered poetry, disputed ruins, and a vanished court that once shaped the pre-Islamic Arab world. What truly happened in Al-Hira? Was the fall of the Lakhmids a political miscalculation, or something more intentional, more concealed? And in the quiet dust of southern Iraq, might the answers still be buried, waiting for the day when someone will uncover the final chapter of this forgotten kingdom? From the vanished grandeur of Al-Hira, where the Lakhmid kings once presided over an oasis of poetry and diplomacy, we travel farther east. Beyond the Zagros Mountains, past the dry plateaus of southeastern Iran, where the desert seems to stretch endlessly beneath a sun that seldom blinks, a different kind of silence waits. Here, in the Sistan Basin, not far from the modern Afghan border, the wind sifts fine dust across the ruins of a city both ancient and strangely modern. This is Shahr-e Sukhteh, the burnt city. The name alone carries weight. It evokes catastrophe, finality, something lost to flame. But this ancient city, scorched and buried under time, is not remembered for a single fiery end. Rather, it is remembered for the many unanswered questions it continues to pose more than 4,000 years after its rise and fall. Set against a flat and inhospitable landscape, Shahr-e Sukhteh appears like a mirage at first, a complex of mounds and excavated walls, gray and ochre against the sun-baked terrain. There are no grand ziggurats here, no towering palaces, no obvious signs of kingship or empire. And yet, this city, founded around 3200 BC and abandoned by 1800 BC, was once one of the most advanced urban centers of the Bronze Age. The mystery begins with the scale. At its height, Shahr-e Sukhteh covered more than 150 hectares, far larger than many contemporary cities in the Indus Valley or Mesopotamia. Streets were laid in grids. Water systems, some suggestive of rudimentary sewage channels, ran beneath the surface. Residential areas were divided from industrial zones, where evidence of pottery, textile work, and even surgery has been uncovered. Surgery? Indeed, in one of the city's most puzzling finds, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a young woman, no more than 25 years old, whose skull shows signs of successful brain surgery. A rectangular opening had been carefully cut into the bone and healed over, suggesting the patient survived the procedure, at least for some time. In a Bronze Age world, this discovery stands as a profound anomaly. And then there is the glass eye, recovered from the grave of another young woman. The artificial eye, made of natural tar and animal fat, with delicate gold lines mimicking capillaries, suggests not only a cosmetic device, but a sophisticated understanding of form, function, and identity. The object is unique in the archaeological record. No other known civilization from this era has left behind anything quite like it. Where did such innovations come from? Who were the people who lived here, so advanced yet so elusive? Some historians link Shahr-e Sukhteh to the Helmand culture, a Bronze Age civilization that stretched from eastern Iran into western Afghanistan. Its connections to the Indus Valley civilization are visible in artifacts, carnelian beads, seal impressions, and motifs that echo those found at Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. Others suggest ties to Elam or even distant Mesopotamia, evidenced by trade goods and stylistic similarities. But there's a curious absence here too. For a city of this size and complexity, no monumental architecture has been found. No temples, no royal tombs, no inscriptions proclaiming the names of rulers or deities. Why? Was Shahr-e Sukhteh a merchant republic, ruled by councils or guilds? Was it a religious colony, a center of learning or healing that avoided the trappings of kingship? Or was it something altogether different? An experiment in urban life whose story was never recorded, only lived. The city burned, not once, but several times. Archaeological layers show at least 3 distinct phases of destruction by fire, each spaced centuries apart. Was this the result of invasion, internal collapse, environmental catastrophe? Some signs point to natural causes, faulty construction, accidental blazes. But the repeated cycles of fire and rebuilding raise another possibility. Was fire part of a ritual or cultural practice? And then there is the abandonment. By 1800 BC, Shahr-e Sukhteh was deserted. The people who once performed complex surgeries and crafted lifelike prosthetics had vanished. No nearby civilization absorbed them. No conqueror recorded their demise. They simply left. Was it drought? Climate models suggest the region became increasingly arid in this period. River systems that once fed the Helmand Basin may have shifted or dried up entirely. Without water, the city would have been unsustainable. But if it were just climate, why were no migration trails or successor settlements found nearby? Could disease have played a role, plague or epidemic? No direct evidence supports this, yet the sudden and complete desertion leaves room for speculation. And then there are theories on the fringe. Some propose that Shahr-e Sukhteh was part of a proto-scientific enclave, a Bronze Age city-state that valued medicine, engineering, and trade above conquest. Others wonder whether the city might have been a sanctuary, a refuge for displaced peoples from neighboring cultures, creating a hybrid society whose uniqueness made it vulnerable when its networks collapsed. There is even speculation, unproven but persistent, that certain technologies found here suggest lost knowledge. The surgical tools, the advanced textiles, the chemical analysis of dyes, these findings to some hint at practices that far exceeded those of neighboring civilizations. Could this city have harbored knowledge that disappeared with it? Of course, we must tread carefully. The temptation to romanticize the ancient is strong. But Shahr-e Sukhteh resists simplification. It is not just a forgotten city. It is a city that confounds our timelines, blurs the borders of ancient cultures, and refuses to fit neatly into the textbook narrative of civilization. Its name, the Burnt City, feels less like a descriptor and more like a riddle. What knowledge went up in smoke here? What voices were silenced by its flames? And what, buried beneath centuries of dust and silence, still waits to be found, somewhere in the charred bones of this city that once burned with mystery and life? As the charred silence of Shahr-e Sukhteh fades into memory, its ash-covered ruins still whispering of vanished knowledge and forgotten hands, we journey westward, across the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. Here, in the vast emptiness of the Madain Salih landscape in northwest Saudi Arabia, something remarkable rises from the sand like a dream frozen in stone. It is called Qasr al-Farid, the Lonely Castle, and it is unlike anything else in the region. Carved directly into a massive sandstone outcrop, Qasr al-Farid appears at first glance like a freestanding structure, a grand monument perhaps once intended for royalty. But step closer, and the illusion gives way. This isn't a building assembled from stone. It is the mountain itself, sculpted with almost otherworldly precision into the facade of a monumental tomb. The structure towers nearly 50 feet high. 4 elegant pilasters frame its entrance, crowned by Nabataean architectural flourishes, decorative cornices, stepped motifs, and a triangular pediment, all carved directly from a single mass of rock. It is a feat of both engineering and artistry, and yet, despite its grandeur, The tomb is unfinished. Only the facade is complete, its lower half meticulously chiseled, its upper layers smooth and unfinished, as though the craftsman simply walked away. Inside, the burial chamber is sparse and incomplete. No inscriptions, no reliefs, no occupants. Why would such a monumental project be abandoned? That's where the mystery begins. The Nabataeans, who built Qasr al-Farid sometime in the 1st century AD, were a wealthy and influential Arab people known best for their capital city of Petra in modern-day Jordan. Famous for their rock-cut architecture, hydraulic systems, and strategic control of desert trade routes, the Nabataeans left behind hundreds of tombs across their territory. Madain Salih, known in antiquity as Hegra, was their southernmost settlement of major importance. Unlike Petra, however, Hegra has remained relatively untouched by modern development. Its dry desert climate and remoteness preserved many of its monuments, including more than 100 elaborately carved tombs. Qasr al-Farid is the largest among them, and the most enigmatic. Why was it never finished? Some scholars suggest a sudden political shift, perhaps the death of a patron or a disruption in the kingdom's finances. Others cite regional instability, noting that Roman expansion may have threatened Nabataean control in the decades after the tomb was begun. But no records survive to confirm these theories. The Nabataeans, for all their achievements, left behind very little written history. Inscriptions are sparse. There are no clear historical texts chronicling the construction of Qasr al-Farid or the identity of the person it was meant to entomb. This absence opens the door to deeper speculation. Could the tomb's abrupt abandonment have stemmed from spiritual reasons? Was there an ill omen, a sign, or a political taboo that led the workers to stop? Some desert folklore, passed down in fragments from Bedouin tribes, suggests that certain places in Madin Saleh were feared as cursed or haunted. Islamic tradition later referred to the region as the dwelling place of the Tammud, an ancient tribe said to have been destroyed for their disobedience. In the Quran, the prophet Saleh warns the Tammud of divine punishment. When they ignore him, they are wiped out, leaving behind their stone-carved dwellings as a reminder. Could such beliefs have originated from older, pre-Islamic taboos surrounding these sites? Was Qasr al-Farid left unfinished because the workers believed they had angered unseen forces? There's another layer of intrigue. The method of carving used by Nabataean stonemasons was unusual. They worked from top to bottom, ensuring that debris fell away as they went, and that the proportions remained visually accurate from ground level. But at Qasr al-Farid, the symmetry shifts abruptly in the upper half. As if something changed, either in the plan or in the craftsman's understanding of the site. Did they encounter unexpected flaws in the rock? Or perhaps more strangely, did they uncover something within? No records mention burials. No skeletal remains have been found. Was Qasr al-Farid never intended to be a tomb at all? Some fringe theorists have proposed alternative theories, that it may have been a ceremonial monument, an astronomical marker, or even a kind of architectural riddle, symbolic rather than functional. There's also the matter of its isolation. While other tombs in Hegra cluster together, Qasr al-Farid stands entirely alone, far from the city's center, separated by dunes and open desert. Its name, the Lonely Castle, is modern, but the loneliness itself is ancient. Why choose this spot, far from the others? Was it meant to mark a territorial boundary, a sacred point in the landscape? Or does the very seclusion of the tomb hint at its deeper significance? From a distance, Qasr al-Farid resembles something mythic, its shadow stretching across sand like the final stanza of a forgotten epic. Visitors today, standing before its looming facade, often describe a sensation not just of wonder, but of silence, as if the monument itself is holding its breath, guarding a story it was never allowed to finish. And perhaps that is the most haunting aspect of all. It is not that Qasr al-Farid was lost or buried. It was never completed. It is a mystery frozen in process, a story interrupted mid-sentence. What could have brought such ambition to an end? Was the tomb's patron erased by history, or by something older, more intangible? And what secrets still lie beneath its sculpted facade, untouched for 2,000 years, waiting for someone or something to finally break the silence? As the winds of the northern Hejaz brush against the lonely facade of Qasr al-Farid, whispering of a tomb never completed, our path now turns deeper into the heart of Arabia, into a desert that once echoed with a different kind of voice. Here, in the shadow of sandstone outcrops scattered across the arid basin of Jubbah, northern Saudi Arabia, a different kind of monument rises. Not built, nor carved into freestanding structures, but etched directly onto the faces of ancient rock. These are the rock carvings of Jubbah, petroglyphs that span thousands of years, whispering fragments of forgotten lives, rituals, and perhaps enigmas that defy explanation. Set within the Nafud Desert, one of the most inhospitable landscapes in the Arabian Peninsula, Jubbah is today a quiet town, but in antiquity, this area was part of a vast paleolake system, an oasis where water once pooled, vegetation flourished, and people gathered. The rock faces of Jebel Sinman, a prominent sandstone escarpment near the town, are covered with carvings, some faded by time, others remarkably well preserved. The images are astonishing in scope and variety. Human figures, some realistic, others abstracted, stand beside or atop domesticated animals. Camels, cattle, ibex, ostriches, and even now extinct wild species are rendered with impressive detail. There are scenes of hunting, archery, dancing, and what appears to be ritual activity. Some figures wear elaborate headdresses, others wield what could be tools or weapons. And then there are images that defy easy categorization. One figure, tall and looming, wears a headpiece with long, branching horns. Another, more stylized, has an unnaturally elongated body and oversized hands raised toward the sky. A grouping of humanoid figures appears to hover or float, legs absent or unfinished. Were these purely symbolic? Artistic flourishes? Or do they reflect a cosmology or belief system we no longer understand? Dating these carvings is difficult, but estimates suggest they span a period from at least 7000 BC to around 500 AD, a time frame that encompasses dramatic environmental shifts and cultural transitions across Arabia. The earliest petroglyphs are often linked to Neolithic peoples, hunter-gatherers who may have migrated with seasonal rains and tracked game through what was once grassland and wetland. Later carvings depict camels, an animal not domesticated in Arabia until around 1200 BC, suggesting continuity and change across millennia. This temporal layering complicates interpretation. Were the sites used by many different groups over thousands of years? Or did a core cultural tradition persist in the region, adapting to climate and time? The carvings of Jubbah offer no written language, only images etched in stone. Without accompanying texts, interpretation becomes a puzzle of context and comparison. What was the purpose of these carvings? Were they territorial markers, religious or ceremonial expressions, visual records of community events? Mainstream archaeology leans toward pragmatic explanations. The petroglyphs were likely tied to hunting rituals, social identity, or memory-making practices. The figures with raised arms may depict supplication or celebration. Animals might indicate seasonal migrations or prey abundance. But these explanations, while plausible, only graze the surface. The location itself raises further questions. Why Jubbah? Why here, in the middle of what is now a desert wasteland? Geological studies show that during the Holocene wet phase, this region was part of a green corridor across northern Arabia, a route that may have connected the Levant with the interior of the Arabian Peninsula. Some suggest that early human migrations out of Africa may have passed through areas like Jubbah. Could these carvings then be remnants of the first storytellers of the Arabian desert, human voices marking their passage through an evolving landscape? Some archaeologists have even proposed that Jubbah and its surrounding petroglyph sites may be among the oldest known human artworks in the region, predating the rise of urban civilizations in Mesopotamia or Egypt. If true, this would place the people of Jubbah among the earliest to create cultural memory in stone. And yet, as we look deeper, the interpretations begin to diverge. Some researchers note recurring geometric patterns and cupolas, circular depressions pounded into the rock. Their purpose is unknown. Could they have marked astronomical events? Stars, lunar cycles, or seasonal changes vital for nomadic survival? Others point to the mystifying figures with unidentifiable adornments or exaggerated features, arguing that they may represent mythical beings, ancestral spirits, or shamanic visions. Theories emerge, some grounded in anthropology, others on the fringe. Could the carvings depict ritualistic trance states, visions induced by altered consciousness? Are the floating figures evidence of symbolic cosmologies, perhaps early representations of gods, sky beings, or spirits of the hunt? There is even a suggestion, though highly speculative, that some of the images may encode proto-script, symbols or motifs repeated with enough consistency to hint at early cognitive systems of communication. But the line between meaning and imagination is perilously thin. What did these ancient carvers intend? Were they speaking to us across time, across language, or only to their own, through a visual language now lost? The Saudi government and international teams have begun preserving the Jubbah petroglyphs as part of a broader heritage effort, recognizing their value not just as art, but as keys to the ancient mind. UNESCO has designated the Jubbah region and nearby sites as World Heritage, yet vast swaths of the desert remain unexplored. What lies still buried under sand and stone? Could there be other rock faces, untouched and unseen, that might unlock more of the mystery? Have we only glimpsed the surface of a deeper, forgotten narrative? Today, the rocks of Jubbah continue to watch in silence. Wind and sand have eroded some of the figures, but many remain vivid, etched not just into sandstone, but into the memory of a region that was once greener, livelier, and perhaps more spiritually charged than we can imagine. Why did these people choose to carve here in such number, with such intensity? What stories were they trying to preserve, and for whom? And in the quiet heat of Jubbah's sunlit stones, are we still being watched by those ancient eyes, waiting perhaps for someone to finally understand what they left behind? As the winds shift across the carved stone of Jubbah, brushing ancient figures with grains of time and silence, we journey northeast, across the Persian Gulf and deep into the rugged mountains of southwestern Iran. Here, nestled at the foot of Kuhe-Ramat, or the Mountain of Mercy, stand the enduring ruins of one of antiquity's most awe-inspiring cities, Persepolis, a name that echoes with the memory of empire. The air here is drier, the light sharper, casting the ruins in golden hues at dawn and bleeding them into shadow by dusk. Towering stone columns rise from the platform like the fingers of a fallen titan, each weathered but defiant. At the heart of this monumental complex, carved directly into its stairways, gateways, and audience halls, lies a visual language that has puzzled scholars for generations. The reliefs of Persepolis, Rows of serene faces, orderly processions, and symbolic gestures form one of the most intricate and enigmatic art programs from the ancient world. They are precise, almost hypnotic in their rhythm. Each figure steps forward in silence, bearing gifts, leading animals, or holding hands in reverence. There is no violence, no battle scenes, no triumphs of war. But beneath this surface calm, questions stir. Who were these figures? And what message did their makers intend to preserve in stone for millennia? Built under the reign of Darius I around 518 BC, and expanded by his successors Xerxes and Artaxerxes, Persepolis was the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. The complex was not merely administrative, it was symbolic, spiritual, and possibly far more than we understand. The reliefs primarily depict delegations from across the empire, bringing tribute to the Persian king. Medes, Elamites, Lydians, Ethiopians, Indians, Babylonians, and many others, identified through their distinctive clothing and gifts, climb the stairways in formal processions. Each appears peaceful, respectful, even honored. But here lies the first layer of mystery. Why does every face appear nearly identical? The expressions are calm, distant, almost otherworldly. There are no signs of fatigue or resistance, no signs of dominance or submission. It is as though individuality has been erased in favor of a greater truth, a message that transcends the moment. Mainstream interpretations suggest the reliefs represent the unity of the empire, a visual embodiment of Darius's vision that all peoples under heaven contribute to the harmony of the world. The king, often shown enthroned and untouched by earthly matters, becomes a symbol of order in a universe of chaos. This was not merely a political statement, it was cosmological. But there are inconsistencies. Some delegations carry objects of unclear origin, strange vessels, unfamiliar instruments, animals that may be symbolic rather than literal. The repeated gestures, hands clasped, figures supporting one another, gazes fixed downward, seem rehearsed, ceremonial, or encoded. Were these actual events or ritual reenactments? And why, across hundreds of feet of stonework, are certain figures subtly larger than others? Not the kings, but specific emissaries. What determined this hierarchy of scale? One interpretation suggests that the entire complex and its reliefs were built not for the living, but for the divine. That the carvings represent not diplomatic reality, but a cosmic procession, an eternal offering of the world's diversity to the unseen forces of order. Others propose that the reliefs may encode astronomical information. The number of figures, their grouping patterns, and architectural alignments at Persepolis have led some researchers to explore potential links to lunar or solar cycles, perhaps tied to Zoroastrian cosmology. Did the builders of Persepolis attempt to bind heaven and earth through stone? Still others look to deeper esoterica. Why are some of the figures shown barefoot, while others wear sandals? Why do certain animals, particularly lions and bulls, appear again and again, often locked in symbolic struggle? Some scholars argue these are metaphors for celestial bodies, the lion representing the sun, the bull representing the moon or the zodiac sign, Taurus echoing a battle between cosmic forces. Could Persepolis, then, have functioned not merely as a palace, but as a ritual calendar, a stone-engraved clock aligning kingship, nature, and divinity? More fringe theories, though unproven, raise compelling questions. Some researchers believe that hidden messages may lie in minute variations among seemingly identical figures, the tilt of a hand, the angle of a foot. Were these artistic errors or subtle codes? And then there's the enigma of its destruction. In 330 BC, Alexander the Great marched into Persia. According to historical sources, he looted Persepolis, then burned it to the ground. But why destroy a site of such breathtaking beauty and symbolic significance? Was this act truly revenge for the Persian sack of Athens, as some suggest? Or did Alexander see in the reliefs a philosophical rival to the Hellenic worldview? In the end, the flames took the cedar roofs, the painted walls, the golden treasures, but not the stone. The relief survived, and they continue to speak, not loudly, but persistently. Each time a new team of archaeologists revisits the site, new details emerge. A carving previously thought to be decorative is found to have subtle anomalies. A weathered stone once overlooked reveals a fragment of paint, hinting at a lost world of color and meaning now faded from memory. So we are left with questions. Was Persepolis merely a monument to royal power, or was it a sacred text carved in stone? Do the reliefs record history, or ritual, reality, or metaphysics? And what might we still be missing, etched in plain sight, within the endless procession of serene, silent faces that climb the stairways of a city that once dared to mirror the heavens? As the silent processions of Persepolis linger in the mind, each carved figure locked in its eternal tribute, our journey leads us away from royal stone and ceremonial splendor and deeper underground. Across the arid landscapes of Iran, stretching beneath deserts and mountains alike, lies a vast and hidden network that defies simple explanation. Unseen from the surface, untouched by the eye of casual passers-by, these are the Qanats, ancient underground water channels, some of which have flowed for over 2,500 years. From the scorched expanses of Yazd to the windswept plateaus of Khorasan, vertical shafts dot the land in eerie regularity, like a row of puncture marks made by some forgotten machine. Each one connects to a gently sloping tunnel that carries water from deep aquifers high in the mountains down to the settlements and fields far below. No pumps, no engines, just gravity, patience, and engineering that seems almost miraculous. But who built them? And how did they master such a system, long before the advent of modern surveying tools? The earliest evidence of Qanats dates back to around 800 BC, during the reign of the Median and later Achaemenid empires. These people, living in a region with fierce summers and vanishing rainfall, faced a critical challenge: how to harness water in a land that so often hides it. The answer was the Qanat, brilliant in design, deceptively simple in concept. A mother well is dug deep into the water table, sometimes more than 100 meters below the surface. From there, a tunnel is painstakingly excavated, sometimes extending for kilometers, with vertical shafts opened every few dozen meters to remove debris and ventilate the workers below. The slope is engineered so precisely, just a gentle incline, that water can flow without pooling or evaporating, eventually surfacing miles away at a destination chosen in advance. It is a feat of endurance, mathematics, and spatial intelligence. And yet, no texts from antiquity clearly describe how it was done. How did these early engineers measure gradients so precisely without modern instruments? How did they maintain alignment underground in total darkness over such distances? Even more baffling, how were such tunnels constructed in solid rock by hand, without collapsing or losing elevation? Modern engineers who study the Qanats are often astonished by their effectiveness and their elegance. In fact, many of these ancient systems still function today, continuing to deliver water to farms and towns as they have for centuries. But alongside this ingenuity, questions arise. Some of the oldest Qanats seem to predate the full rise of the Persian Empire. Were they truly invented by the Achaemenids, or were they inheriting a forgotten tradition from a far older culture? Recent archaeological surveys in Iran and Afghanistan have uncovered evidence of ancient, pre-Iron Age tunnel systems, some now entirely dry and buried under sediment. Could these be prototypes or relics of an even more distant age? Adding to the mystery are the legends. In certain villages, the Qanats are not merely infrastructure. They are sacred. Folktales tell of spirits that guard the water below, of forbidden shafts that should never be entered, and of underground chambers discovered by accident, filled not with water, but with artifacts, carvings, and sealed doorways. Is this pure myth, shaped by centuries of reverence and fear? Or could some Qanats intersect with older, hidden networks? Forgotten temples, pre-Zoroastrian shrines, or burial chambers sealed off from the world above. Some researchers note that several Qanats appear to change direction inexplicably, curving to avoid something, even when the topography offers no reason. Were these course changes practical, or deliberate detours around something unknown? And then, there is the question of the builders themselves. Mainstream accounts credit the Persians with refining the technology and spreading it across the Middle East, North Africa, and even into Spain and China. But in many of the oldest systems, there are no inscriptions, no reliefs, no dedications, no names of kings or engineers. The work is anonymous, silent, as if the people who built them were more concerned with the function than the fame. Or perhaps, as some have suggested, they were following instructions handed down through oral traditions, schematics of memory rather than blueprint. Fringe theorists propose even more speculative origins. Some link the Qanats to stories of subterranean cities hidden beneath deserts and mountains. Others point to alignments between surface shafts and celestial bodies, suggesting a possible link between hydrology and astronomy in ancient Persian spiritual thought. Could the Qanats have had a dual function, practical on one level, symbolic or ritualistic on another? Still others ask, could such complex engineering truly have emerged in isolation? Or were the builders of Qanats drawing on knowledge lost from even older civilizations, ones we barely remember? UNESCO now protects several Qanat systems as World Heritage Sites. The Iranian government has launched efforts to preserve and study them, but vast portions of the network remain unmapped, unexcavated, and unexplored. Deep underground, beneath dust and time, many of these tunnels continue to carry water silently through the dark, never once having seen sunlight. What secrets do they still carry? What knowledge carved through rock, unseen, in service of life and survival? And perhaps more haunting, what lies at the ends of the tunnels that no one has dared to follow? In a land where water means life and silence often hides truth, the Qanats of Persia remain one of the ancient world's most enduring enigmas. A reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary mysteries are not found in the heavens, but far beneath our feet. As we leave behind the shadowed Qanats of Persia, those silent rivers of stone flowing beneath sun-scorched soil, our path turns westward into the high plateaus of central Anatolia, where the land itself begins to look otherworldly. Here lies Cappadocia, a place sculpted not by human hands, but by volcanic fire and wind. Eroded cones, towering pinnacles, and fragile spires known as fairy chimneys rise from the earth like frozen smoke. The rock is soft, light, easily carved, yet the shapes it forms are as alien as they are ancient. But the real mystery lies below the surface. Beneath this strange landscape, winding through the volcanic tuff like veins through bone, are vast and intricate subterranean tunnel systems, entire cities built underground, some descending as many as 18 levels deep. The most famous of these is Derinkuyu, a city that, even today, challenges our understanding of ancient engineering. Discovered by accident in 1963 beneath a modern home, Derinkuyu revealed something staggering. More than 600 entrances, hidden in courtyards, behind walls, or beneath unassuming homes. The city could hold as many as 20,000 people, complete with air shafts, kitchens, wine presses, wells, storage rooms, chapels, and even what appears to be a school or religious complex on the lower levels. But who built it? And why? Mainstream archaeology dates the earliest levels of Derinkuyu to around the 8th or 7th century BC, likely constructed by Phrygians or later early Anatolian peoples, then expanded during the Byzantine period as a place of refuge from Arab invasions. Over time, the tunnels were adapted, reinforced, and inhabited by different groups: Christians, Zoroastrians, Hittites, and perhaps even earlier peoples whose names are lost to time. Still, the deeper you descend, the more the story begins to slip into shadow. Unlike a typical fortress or village, Derinkuyu and its neighboring cities such as Kaymaklu, Ozkanak, and Maza were clearly built for long-term habitation underground. Not just hiding places, but self-sustaining environments. What could have driven people to live entirely beneath the earth for months or even years at a time? Was it war, climate catastrophe, religious persecution, or something else entirely? The ventilation shafts, some over 180 feet deep, suggest a level of architectural foresight far beyond basic survival. The air circulation remains effective even today, allowing for breathable conditions across multiple levels. Water wells were dug from within the cities, sealed off from the surface, protecting them from contamination or sabotage. Large rolling stone doors, resembling millstones, could be locked from the inside, clearly defensive in purpose. But no historical record tells us exactly how they were built. No texts, no inscriptions, no plans. How did ancient builders map out these multi-level labyrinths in total darkness? How did they maintain structure and airflow through miles of rock? Some archaeologists believe these underground cities evolved from simple storage chambers, gradually expanded across generations. Others suggest they may have been part of a larger system, linked by tunnels that stretch for miles across Cappadocia's valleys and ridges. In fact, satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar hint at undiscovered networks still buried beneath the modern landscape. And then come the more speculative theories. Some propose that Derinkuyu and its sister cities were not originally defensive at all, but remnants of a far older civilization, one that retreated underground during a period of extreme environmental upheaval, perhaps even a solar event or asteroidal impact that rendered the surface temporarily uninhabitable. Supporters of this idea point to the depth and scale of the tunnel systems, and the fact that multiple cities appear to be strategically aligned, as if part of a broader regional infrastructure. One theory posits that Cappadocia was a subterranean stronghold, not just for one tribe or people, but a whole network of communities who vanished before written history. Other theories move further toward the fringe. Could the underground cities have been designed to protect against invaders not from above, but from below? Echoes of this appear in local folklore, stories of spirits, jinn, or beings from deep inside the earth. Even Plato's account of Atlantis, some suggest, may reflect an ancestral memory of people who survived catastrophe by going underground. The tunnels themselves seem to mirror human fears: long corridors with sudden dead ends, disorienting turns, and dark chambers where sound disappears. Were these just pragmatic designs or deliberate psychological deterrents meant to confuse intruders? There are curious architectural details, too. Some rooms have unusual acoustics, amplifying even the softest whisper, while others are completely silent, as if intentionally dampened. Certain chambers appear to have no clear purpose. No tools, no storage, no symbols, only smooth walls and silence. Why were they built? For what rituals? What secrets? Today, only a handful of these tunnels are open to the public. Many remain unexplored, sealed off, or lost beneath centuries of sediment and settlement. Locals still tell of entrances in barns and backyards, of sudden cave-ins that reveal hidden corridors, and of doors that once opened, but now refuse to budge. Could there be levels deeper still? Cities untouched for millennia? And if so, what might they contain? As modern archaeologists continue to probe Cappadocia's depths with LiDAR, seismic imaging, and 3D reconstruction, more clues may emerge. But for now, the mystery remains intact. Were these subterranean cities born of necessity or prophecy, crafted by human ingenuity or guided by older, forgotten knowledge? And deep beneath the fairy chimneys of Cappadocia, in the stillness where sunlight never reaches, might there still echo the voices of those who carved their lives into the rock and disappeared? As we ascend from the carved shadows of Cappadocia's underground labyrinths, where generations lived and vanished beneath stone, we turn our gaze southward toward the fertile floodplains of the Nile Valley, a land of eternal rhythms and cyclical life, a land where the desert yields to green, and where history has often blurred into myth. Amid the ruins of Avaris in the eastern Nile Delta, scattered beneath layers of mud brick and buried time, lies the trace of a people who once ruled Egypt, but who did not originate there. A people whose sudden rise, foreign customs, and mysterious language confounded even the scribes of ancient Thebes. They are known to us as the Hyksos. But who were they? The very name Hyksos comes from the Egyptian phrase Heka Kasut, meaning rulers of foreign lands. Yet this term, first appearing in Egyptian sources during the Second Intermediate Period around 1650 BC, offers little clarity. Were the Hyksos invaders? Migrants? Merchants who seized power? Or a more complex fusion of cultures long in the making? Mainstream archaeology places the Hyksos within a period of fragmentation in Egypt, between the grandeur of the Middle Kingdom and the eventual rise of the New Kingdom. As centralized authority weakened, the Delta region became a frontier, open to settlers from the Levant. Over time, a group of these outsiders, perhaps Canaanites, Syrians, or Amorites, rose to power, establishing a capital at Avaris, near modern-day Tel el-Dab'a. Yet the manner in which they came to rule remains an open question. There is little evidence of widespread destruction or violent conquest. No great battle monuments, no dramatic collapse of temples or palaces. Instead, the archaeological record suggests a gradual integration, foreign objects, burial customs, and architecture merging slowly with Egyptian styles. Was it not a conquest, but a cultural infiltration? And still, contradictions persist. The Hyksos introduced innovations that reshaped Egypt's future: the horse-drawn chariot, advanced bronze weaponry, and the composite bow. These technologies would later become staples of Egyptian military power, yet they appeared first, not in Thebes or Memphis, but in Avaris. Where did this knowledge come from? Some historians point to connections with the Levant, particularly the region of modern-day Syria and northern Mesopotamia. Similarities in pottery styles, linguistic fragments, and burial practices support this view. But these links, while suggestive, do not form a complete picture. More intriguing are the cultural anomalies. Among the ruins of Avaris are palatial structures unlike anything seen in earlier Egyptian architecture. Foundation deposits, foreign deity figurines, and ceremonial rooms reflect a society deeply rooted in Semitic and possibly Hurrian traditions. The Hyksos worshipped not Ra or Osiris, but Baal, Resheph, and Anat. They respected Egyptian forms, but their gods spoke a different language. Could they have been descendants of nomadic tribes, forced southward by drought or conflict? or exiles from a distant kingdom carrying with them lost knowledge and a determination to survive? Ancient Egyptian sources, particularly from the New Kingdom period, paint the Hyksos as barbaric usurpers, a disruption to the sacred order. But these accounts were written after the Hyksos were expelled, in a time when Egypt sought to restore pride and divine rule. Are these texts history or propaganda? When the Theban king Undeciphered finally drove the Hyksos from Egypt around 1550 BC, he recorded it as a triumphant liberation. Yet, even in defeat, the Hyksos left behind tools, words, and techniques that would echo through Egyptian society for centuries. The location of their capital, Avaris, adds another layer to the enigma. Situated at a critical point between the Nile Delta and the Sinai, Avaris would have controlled key trade routes linking Egypt to the broader ancient Near East. Excavations have revealed massive harbor works, warehouses, and international ceramics, evidence of a cosmopolitan center, not an isolated war camp. This was a hub of exchange and influence. So again, we ask, who were they really? More speculative theories suggest the Hyksos may have been more than displaced tribes. Some propose they were merchant kings, possibly connected to the Mitanni or early Hittites, using trade networks to exert soft power before transitioning into open rule. Others entertain the idea that they were the remnants of a forgotten seafaring people, fleeing catastrophe and bringing with them a hybrid culture of East and West. A small but persistent fringe theory connects the Hyksos to the biblical tradition, proposing links to early Hebrews or to other Semitic patriarchal tribes. While these claims remain controversial and unproven, they reflect an enduring fascination that the Hyksos may be a missing piece in the vast, interwoven puzzle of ancient identity. What remains most elusive, however, is their origin point. Despite modern DNA analysis and comparative archaeology, no single homeland has been confirmed. The Hyksos seem to have emerged not from one place, but from a confluence of migrations, ideas, and perhaps displacements, making them not an anomaly, but a mirror of the ancient world's complexity. They were foreign, but familiar, different, yet indispensable. And perhaps that is the real mystery. Not who the Hyksos were, but how they became both inside and outside of Egypt at once, both rulers and strangers, inheritors and disruptors. Could it be that the Hyksos were not an exception to Egyptian history, but its shadow, its forgotten counterpart? And if so, what else might we have lost in our efforts to draw hard lines between civilizations that were, in truth, never so separate at all? The ruins of Avaris remain mostly unexcavated. Beneath the fields and villages of the Nile Delta, layers of earth still guard the answers. Somewhere in the silt and silence, the story of the Hyksos waits to be heard again. As the memory of the Hyksos fades into the sands of time, we shift from the river-fed lowlands of the Nile to a city perched on rocky hills, ancient, layered, and holy. A city whose stones have been walked by prophets and conquerors, and whose very foundations seem to breathe history. Jerusalem. Here, beneath the golden dome and the towering minarets, below the cobbled lanes of the old city, lies a deeper stratum of mystery, one carved not only by tools, but by sound. In the southern portion of the Temple Mount, close to the remnants of the massive retaining walls built by Herod the Great in the 1st century BC, are enormous blocks of limestone, some weighing over 500 tons. Their placement remains an architectural marvel, but among these, certain stones stand out, not because of their size, but because of what they do when touched. They ring. Visitors and researchers alike have reported that when struck, lightly with the palm or a small object, these stones emit a clear bell-like tone, Some call them the sounding stones of Jerusalem. The acoustic resonance is not incidental. It is repeatable, consistent, and unlike the muted thuds expected of solid rock. What causes this? And did the ancient builders know? Geologists examining the stones have suggested the resonance may be due to a combination of the stone's mineral composition and the precise way it was quarried and shaped. Meliki limestone, the type most commonly used in Herodian constructions, is relatively soft when first cut, but hardens over time. Some speculate that the unique vibration of these blocks may be the result of natural cavities, density patterns, or internal fractures. Yet this alone doesn't explain why only specific stones produce sound and why they do so in harmonic frequencies. Some of the ringing stones seem to interact with one another, creating overlapping tones like notes in a chord. Could this be coincidence? Or was it intentional? In the absence of written records describing the purpose, scholars are left to wonder. Herod's massive building project on the Temple Mount was an engineering feat, requiring precision stonework on a scale rarely matched. Might his builders have selected or tuned certain stones to vibrate or sing? If so, to what end? Some theorists suggest the acoustic properties were meant to enhance ritual experiences. The Second Temple was not only a religious center, but a ceremonial space rich with music, incense, and movement. Could the walls themselves have been meant to resonate, responding to drums, chants, or priestly steps? It's a compelling notion. Ancient cultures across the world infused sacred architecture with sound. The hypogeum of Malta echoes in tuned frequencies. Mayan temples whisper back with the clap of a hand. Could Jerusalem's temple have done the same? Yet there is no surviving liturgy or record that explicitly refers to these sounds. Others propose more speculative ideas. Some point to traditions in Kabbalah and mystical Judaism, which speak of the vibration of divine names and the role of resonance in spiritual elevation. Could the sounding stones have been chosen to mirror the music of the spheres or to align with sacred tones? Still more fringe theorists have suggested that the resonating blocks are remnants of a lost technology, a form of stone manipulation or construction we no longer understand. They ask, could sound itself have been used to move or shape these megaliths, as some believe occurred in other ancient sites? It's important to tread carefully with such theories, but the mystery remains. Why do only certain blocks ring? And why do they appear in areas of particular ritual significance? The most prominent sounding stones are found along the southern and western walls, areas that historically housed the entrances for pilgrims and the administrative courts. Some have wondered if the sound served as a signal, to alert, to guide, or even to test the purity of the stone. In ancient times, some stonemasons believed a true block could sing when struck, an echo of the divine craftsmanship. Others note the placement of these stones in relation to ancient water channels beneath the Temple Mount. Could subterranean cavities have created natural amplification, enhancing certain frequencies? Or was the water itself part of a larger resonant system, harnessed for unknown purposes? Unfortunately, the political and religious sensitivity of the Temple Mount has made deeper investigation nearly impossible. Excavations are restricted, instruments are forbidden. Much of what we know comes from 19th century explorers, early 20th century researchers, and rare acoustic tests performed under special permits. Yet the accounts are consistent. Stone after stone, struck just so, responds with a sound not unlike a gong, deep, echoing, alive. And so the question remains, were the sounding stones of Jerusalem a byproduct of brilliant construction or a deliberate element of sacred design? Did ancient builders know they were shaping not only walls but instruments? As we stand before these stones, worn smooth by centuries of hands and time, it's easy to overlook what we can no longer hear. But if we listen closely, perhaps the stones are still speaking, and beneath the noise of the modern city, beneath prayers, shouts, and bells, there may yet linger a quieter voice, one that hums through the rock, waiting to be heard again. What message does it carry? And what might we learn if we dared to strike the stone and listen? From the echoing stones of Jerusalem, whose silent songs still stir wonder, we journey northward to the windswept coast of modern-day Syria. There, nestled beneath centuries of dust and conflict, lies a once thriving port city forgotten by time. Ugarit. At first glance, the ruins are modest. Crumbling walls of sun-bleached limestone, weathered columns leaning under the weight of time. But in 1928, a chance discovery in a farmer's field near Ras Shamra would change everything. Beneath that field lay a buried archive, one of the most significant finds in the history of ancient languages. Tablets, hundreds of them, inscribed in wedge-shaped marks, unlike any previously known. These were not Egyptian hieroglyphs nor Sumerian cuneiform. What scholars uncovered was a language lost for over 3,000 years, an ancient tongue that seemed to bridge civilizations. It would come to be known as Ugaritic. But what exactly is Ugaritic, and why does its origin remain a riddle? Unlike earlier scripts that used hundreds of symbols, Ugaritic used just 30 characters, a clear, systematic alphabet etched into clay. It predates the Phoenician alphabet, which later gave rise to Greek, Latin, and ultimately the letters you're reading now. Could it be that Ugarit held the missing link in the evolution of writing? Some scholars believe Ugaritic may represent the earliest fully developed alphabetic system. It was written left to right, used to record contracts, myths, hymns, and administrative documents. And its literary content is striking. Entire mythological cycles, including the Baal cycle and texts about El, Dagon, and Anat, gods also echoed in later Semitic traditions. But despite its importance, the language's deeper roots are still debated. Linguists classify Ugaritic as a Northwest Semitic language, akin to Hebrew, Aramaic, and Phoenician. Yet certain grammatical features are unusual, words and forms that appear nowhere else. It's as if Ugaritic occupies a unique crossroads, part of a known family yet distinct, an ancient dialect with secrets of its own. More perplexing still is how and why it disappeared. By around 1200 BC, Ugarit was gone, not merely declined, erased. The city was burned, its temples and palaces shattered. Scholars often attribute this to the Sea Peoples, enigmatic raiders who swept through the eastern Mediterranean during the late Bronze Age collapse. But no definitive culprit has been found. The destruction was swift and final. The Ugaritic script, so advanced, was never seen again. Why would such a sophisticated writing system vanish overnight, while cruder scripts endured? And why are there no known descendants of the Ugaritic language? No inscriptions in neighboring cities, no borrowed forms in subsequent alphabets. It's as though Ugaritic was created in a bubble, flourishing in isolation, only to vanish without a trace. Could it be that the Ugaritic alphabet was not a predecessor, but a parallel innovation? A script developed independently for a unique culture that didn't survive long enough to influence its neighbors? Or is it possible that the scribes of Ugarit were tapping into an even older tradition, one we've yet to uncover? There are hints, fragments really, of other alphabetic experiments in the region, a few symbols in the Sinai Peninsula, some strange graffiti in the Egyptian desert, but these are incomplete, disconnected. Could Ugarit be the missing piece of a much larger, largely hidden linguistic evolution? And then there is the question of the city's literary content. Among the tablets found at Ugarit are ritual texts and incantations, written not in Ugaritic, but in languages we still haven't deciphered. Strange symbols, foreign scripts, Were these magical formulas, foreign imports, or clues to a multilingual society, one in contact with cultures we still know little about? Some fringe theories suggest Ugarit may have been a kind of linguistic laboratory, an intentional crossroads where priests and scribes experimented with new forms of writing. The city's position, between Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and Egypt, certainly supports the idea of cultural fusion. Could Ugarit have been a center for codifying sacred knowledge, its language designed as much for esoteric transmission as for trade? Others have proposed more speculative ideas, that the lost language of Ugarit hides numerical codes, or that its hymns carry acoustic resonances tied to forgotten temple rituals. These claims remain unverified, yet they echo a broader truth. Ugarit was a place where language was more than a tool, it was a vessel of power. And like the sounding stones of Jerusalem, perhaps the clay tablets of Ugarit were once meant to speak, to chant, to sing, to carry the voice of gods and kings through time. But today, those voices are silent, or nearly so. Thanks to decades of painstaking scholarship, we can now read many Ugaritic texts. We can translate lines of praise to Baal, or track inventories of grain and oil. But understanding the mind behind the language, the worldview, the metaphors, the dreams, remains elusive. Because language is more than grammar and vocabulary. It is perspective. It is memory. And when a language dies with its speakers, part of their reality dies with it. So we return to the central question. Why did Ugaritic vanish so completely, so utterly, when others survived? Was it political collapse? Cultural assimilation? A shift in trade routes? Or something deeper, something we've yet to perceive? The earth beneath Ras Shamra may still hold answers. New excavations occasionally reveal fresh tablets, shards of a lost voice waiting to be heard again. But until then, the lost language of Ugarit remains a whisper in the ruins, a script born before its time, and silenced before we could truly understand what it was trying to say. What secrets still lie buried in those clay lines? And might we, someday, hear them again? As the final syllables of Ugaritic fade into the forgotten winds of the Syrian coast, our journey now turns east, into the broad, arid plains of ancient Mesopotamia, a land of shifting rivers and empires layered like sediment, each rising and falling with time's silent hand. Here, in the shadow of the ancient Tigris, not far from the modern-day city of Kirkuk in northern Iraq, lie the quiet remains of Nuzi, an unassuming archaeological site once hidden beneath a mound of dust and silence. But beneath its weathered ruins, archaeologists discovered something both tragic and strangely illuminating: the charred remnants of what has come to be known as the Burnt Palace. It is not the palace's grandeur that captures the imagination. The structure itself, modest by royal standards, was built with humble mud brick walls and timber supports. Its rooms were arranged in a typical pattern for the period: reception halls, storage chambers, living quarters, and administrative offices. But what makes this place extraordinary is not how it stood, but how it fell. When the palace was excavated in the early 20th century, layers of ash, collapsed timbers, and cracked pottery revealed a sudden, consuming fire. Everything had burned. The walls had blackened. Doorways had collapsed inward. Objects had been left as they were, frozen in the moment of disaster. Clay tablets, thousands of them, had been baked by the flames, accidentally preserved in what would otherwise have been their destruction. But how did such a fire begin? And why was there no evidence of escape, defense, or recovery? Nuzi, occupied around 1500 to 1350 BC, was a thriving provincial city during the height of the Hurrian Mitanni kingdom's influence. The people who lived here were scribes, merchants, farmers, and priests, part of a world shaped by shifting alliances between the great powers of the age: Babylon, Assyria, the Hittites, and Mitanni. And yet, for reasons still unknown, the palace burned. And with it, so too did the political heart of the city. Most mainstream scholars suggest an invasion or internal uprising as the most likely explanation. After all, this was an era of sudden and often violent transitions. The Assyrians, rising in power to the east, would soon conquer and assimilate much of the surrounding region. Could the fire at Nusi have been part of a larger campaign, an act of conquest or retaliation? But there are problems with that theory. Excavators found no weapons, no bodies, and no signs of looting. The tablets remained in their archives. Storage jars still held their contents. Gold jewelry was left untouched. If this was an invasion, why wasn't anything taken? Other researchers have proposed a different possibility. An accidental fire, sparked by a cooking hearth or oil lamp. But the thoroughness of the destruction, the way entire rooms collapsed inward, sealed shut by debris, suggests something more deliberate. The fire was fast, hot, and total. Could it have been a ritual act? A symbolic burning to mark the end of a reign or a dynasty? In some ancient Near Eastern cultures, structures were burned intentionally to purify, to release trapped spirits, or to mark transitions between worlds. And this is where Nuzi begins to stray from the known into the speculative. Among the thousands of tablets preserved in the fire were not only economic records and legal contracts, but also omens, astrological charts, and ritual incantations. Some of these texts suggest a worldview deeply concerned with cosmic balance, the will of gods, and the manipulation of fate through ceremony and word. Was the palace burned as part of a rite? Or was it the consequence of a ritual gone wrong? Even more curious are several tablets that appear to be duplicates, identical legal contracts copied multiple times, often with minor changes in phrasing or order. Some scholars believe this reflects training exercises for scribes. Others suspect something stranger, that language itself, its order, repetition, and structure, was believed to hold magical power. Could the scribes of Nuzi have practiced a form of linguistic alchemy, recording formulas or rituals meant not only to bind contracts, but to alter fate itself? Adding to the mystery, the burnt palace was not rebuilt. After the fire, Nuzi declined rapidly. The city was not repopulated. Its once busy streets fell silent. No later cultures made use of the site in any significant way. Why? Did the fire carry spiritual significance that made rebuilding taboo? Was the site considered cursed, or perhaps sacred? Or did the political landscape shift so completely that Nuzi simply lost its importance? One tablet found in the ruins offers an eerie glimpse. It reads like a mundane legal document, recording the sale of land, but the date formula references an event not found elsewhere, the year the palace was judged. No other explanation, no further elaboration. What judgment? By whom? There is a silence around Nuzi that feels deliberate, not merely forgotten but erased, like a memory deliberately sealed away. A place once full of life, preserved not by time, but by fire. And yet, the tablets remain. Thousands of them, lines of cuneiform still pressed into clay, whispering names, prayers, deeds, and disputes. They tell us much, but not everything. Not the cause of the fire, not the fate of the people, and not the deeper meaning, if there is one, behind the palace's dramatic end. Was it simply the product of a volatile age, or was something more profound unfolding behind the scenes? Perhaps somewhere beneath the ashes of Nuzi lies another tablet, one final clue, still waiting to be read. Until then, the burnt palace remains a shadow in the ancient landscape, a place consumed by fire, but still holding its secrets in silence. What was it that ended Nuzi so completely, and so mysteriously? And what might we discover if we dared to sift through the ashes once more? As the embers of Nudzi's vanished palace fade into the silent plains of northern Mesopotamia, we journey southwest, beyond the shifting sands and stone plateaus, to one of the ancient world's most breathtaking marvels. Here, carved from rose-red cliffs and veiled in desert winds, lies Petra, the fabled city of stone. Most visitors to Petra are drawn to its famous facade, the towering treasury that looms like a dream from the rock. But if one follows the old processional road past the colonnaded streets and beyond the Roman-style gates, another structure rises quietly among the scattered ruins. Less photographed, less understood, and yet possibly more enigmatic than any of Petra's grand monuments. It is known as the Temple of the Winged Lions. At first glance, the temple appears broken. Pillars toppled, walls collapsed, its sanctity stripped bare by time and erosion. But fragments remain. Sandstone stairways leading to raised platforms, decorative capitals bearing carved lions with outstretched wings, a mosaic floor, now faded, once glittering in sunlit ceremony. And near the altar, a series of mysterious sculptures and inscriptions, many of which resist clear interpretation. The temple dates to the 1st century AD, during the height of the Nabataean kingdom, a civilization of remarkable sophistication, whose control of caravan routes made them one of the wealthiest cultures in the region. And yet, like much of Petra itself, the identity of the deity worshipped here remains elusive. Who or what was venerated within these crumbling walls? At the heart of the temple, once stood a large statue, now shattered. Only fragments remain: a delicate hand, a pair of feet, and the drapery of a garment, all carved from marble unlike any found nearby. Scholars believe the statue may have been the goddess Al-Uzza, a major deity in the Nabataean pantheon, associated with water, fertility, and celestial forces. But there is no inscription naming her. There are no surviving texts that declare the temple's dedication, no preserved prayers, no written doctrine. Why would such a grand temple, so clearly central to Petra's sacred landscape, remain silent about its divine occupant? Some researchers point to the lions with wings as symbolic clues. In Mesopotamian and Levantine traditions, winged lions often serve as guardians, associated with protective deities or divine kingship. Were these creatures guarding the threshold of a mystical realm, or were they symbols of the deity herself? Interestingly, the temple shows signs of syncretism, the blending of religious ideas. Hints of Greco-Roman influence are present in the layout and construction. Columns adorned with Corinthian capitals, imported marble. Yet the iconography resists simple classification. The presence of incense burners, offering tables, and unique votive altars suggest rituals distinct from classical practice. Could this have been a temple not to a single goddess, but to a fusion of divine archetypes? A Nabataean response to growing Hellenistic and Roman influences? And then there's the question of what happened to the temple. Sometime around the 2nd or 3rd century AD, the temple was damaged by fire. Archaeological evidence shows blackened stones, melted fixtures, and scattered debris. But there's no indication of a battle or natural disaster. Was it deliberate destruction? A purge during a religious transition? Or something more symbolic, a ceremonial closing of a sacred space as the Nabataeans faded into Roman control? Adding to the mystery are the dozens of clay figurines found in nearby workshops, some animal, some human, some ambiguous. Many have no known parallel in the region. Their forms are abstract, their purpose unclear. Were they offerings? Toys? Magical objects? Near one chamber, archaeologists discovered a carved basin, possibly a purification pool, next to niches that may have held sacred oils or substances. But no writing, no records, only silence. The deeper one delves into the Temple of the Winged Lions, the more questions arise. Why was such care given to this space, and yet so little left behind to explain it? Is it possible that the deity worshipped here was intentionally hidden, her identity known only to an initiated priesthood? That the rituals practiced were esoteric, reserved for a spiritual elite? Or could the temple have served multiple functions, both sacred and political, its symbolism layered to protect meanings now lost? Fringe theories suggest even stranger possibilities. Some have noted the temple's unusual alignment, hinting at astronomical orientations, perhaps connected to solstice rituals or stellar veneration. Others point to the presence of lion imagery in distant regions, wondering if Petra was once part of a broader spiritual network stretching across the ancient world. And still others speculate that the winged lions were not symbols at all, but representations of a vanished mythology, a goddess whose name was never meant to be written, only spoken, only invoked within the temple's sanctuary. If so, then silence was not absence, but reverence. Today, the Temple of the Winged Lions stands open to the desert, its mysteries exposed yet unanswered. Archaeologists continue to study its ruins, piecing together fragments, sifting through dust and time. But the meaning remains stubbornly opaque. Was this Petra's spiritual heart? A sacred site for celestial rites? A forgotten goddess's last sanctuary? Or something altogether more complex, a portal into a worldview we no longer understand? One can only wonder what lies beneath the rubble that has yet to be uncovered, or what meanings were never meant to survive. Who was the winged lion watching over? And why did she vanish into stone? As we leave behind the crumbled sanctuaries of Petra and the silent gaze of its winged lions, we move southward, into a land far more barren, yet just as steeped in enigma. The Negev desert stretches across southern Israel like a vast, wind-scoured parchment. Its beige hills and red rock canyons seem devoid of life. The air is still, the silence unbroken but for the whisper of wind against stone. A place that appears empty at first glance, but hidden across its lonely expanse, etched onto the rock faces of remote wadis and forgotten trails, are thousands of enigmatic carvings, some shallow and tentative, others bold and precise. They are known collectively as the Negev Desert Petroglyphs. These carvings appear unexpectedly on solitary boulders, canyon walls, cliff edges. They vary wildly in age, style, and subject. Some depict animals, ibex, camels, dogs, snakes. Others show human-like figures with exaggerated limbs, often in scenes of hunting or ritual. And then there are the symbols, geometric forms, spirals, mysterious lines intersecting in seemingly deliberate ways. Who carved these images? And more importantly, why? Dating the Negev petroglyphs has proven remarkably difficult. There are no inscriptions that clearly link them to a known kingdom or historical event. The oldest of them could be as ancient as 6,000 years, possibly from the Chalcolithic or early Bronze Age. Others may be as recent as a few centuries ago, carved by Bedouins or nomadic peoples. But many remain undated, unclaimed by history, orphaned from any known tradition. Some archaeologists suggest they are part of a long, unbroken continuum of desert expression, a cultural practice passed from generation to generation, across shifting languages and forgotten peoples. The petroglyphs, in this view, are messages in a common visual dialect, part record, part ritual, part identity. But others see more than that. Some of the carvings form strange patterns when viewed from above. At certain sites, rocks are marked with clusters of spirals, grids, and what appear to be directional indicators, arrows pointing nowhere, paths etched into stone where no trail remains. Were these maps, calendars, or something even more symbolic? messages intended not for human eyes, but for the sky. One especially puzzling motif is the horned figure, a humanoid shape with prominent curving horns or antennae. It appears across multiple sites, often alone or surrounded by lines radiating outward. Is this a deity, a shaman, or a representation of something else altogether? Some unknown entity from the spiritual or mythic world? Mainstream scholarship has largely been cautious. The carvings, they say, are likely a mix of artistic expression and practical record-keeping, visual traces left by herders, hunters, and travelers marking territory, events, or seasonal rites. But this does not explain the sheer scale and repetition. Some carvings are found in remote, nearly inaccessible locations, far from water or established paths. Others have been superimposed over earlier markings, suggesting a kind of visual palimpsest, new generations carving over the memories of the old. Why return to the same stones, century after century? Some theories venture into more speculative terrain. A few researchers have noticed that certain petroglyph sites in the Negev appear to align with astronomical events, solstices, lunar cycles, or star positions. In this interpretation, the carvings may be part of an ancient ritual landscape, one that mapped the heavens onto the earth. Could these be part of a prehistoric desert observatory, their meaning legible only to those initiated into a now-lost cosmology? Others have suggested that the carvings served as threshold markers, liminal points between the material world and a sacred unseen dimension. The horned figures and radiant lines in this context could be invocations, protective symbols, or visual prayers. Even more provocative are the claims that the carvings resemble symbols found elsewhere, in distant parts of the Middle East and even in Central Asia and North Africa. Some have noted resemblances to proto-writing systems, such as the Vinci symbols or early Indus script. While mainstream archaeologists urge caution, the possibility lingers. Were these glyphs fragments of a lost language, one never meant to be spoken aloud? Despite decades of study, no single explanation accounts for all the Negev carvings. Their diversity defies classification. Some show hunting scenes that seem straightforward. Others appear abstract, almost mathematical. Still others look like personal marks, akin to signatures or tribal emblems. There are no accompanying texts, no oral histories that explain them, no artifacts buried nearby that reveal their makers. And in a desert that changes little across the centuries, the carvings seem outside of time, as if they belonged to a world only partially accessible to us now. Are they the last echoes of a forgotten desert faith, the markings of solitary visionaries, or simply the earliest attempts to leave a trace, to say, "We were here"? Today, the petroglyphs are at risk, from erosion, vandalism, and the march of development. But the mystery remains. Why were these images placed here? Why in these patterns? And why has no clear key been found to decipher their meaning? Perhaps it is because the desert holds its truths differently, not in words or monuments, but in silence, in stone, in signs we were never meant to understand completely. What stories are still etched into the rocks beneath the Negev sun? And who will listen deeply enough to hear them? As the desert sun sinks below the jagged hills of the Negev, the last light fades from the ancient petroglyphs that whisper stories into stone. But the mystery does not end with sunset. In fact, it begins anew, above. Because for the Bedouin tribes who have roamed the deserts of the Middle East for millennia, the sky has always been a map, a guide, a lifeline, and yet, some say, it may also be a mystery. High above the dunes and black basalt plains of the Arabian Peninsula, the stars once served as the only compass. No roads, no signposts, just constellations shifting across the ink-black heavens. But the way the Bedouin read them was unlike any other known system. Not Greek, not Babylonian, not even Islamic in origin. Instead, it was something older, something local, something largely unwritten. They are known as the Bedouin star maps, a network of celestial pathways, tribal waypoints, and timekeepers that have been passed orally from generation to generation, long before recorded history. But where did this knowledge come from? And how, in the vastness of the desert night, did the Bedouin develop a sky language so precise it could guide caravans across thousands of miles, without a single written chart? We begin in the heart of the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth. Here, during the driest months, the land seems devoid of landmarks. The wind reshapes the dunes daily. Trails vanish overnight. Yet Bedouin tribes have navigated this terrain for centuries. Not with compasses, but with memory, with poetry, and with stars. A well-known example comes from the tribe of the Rashidun. Oral accounts describe a sequence of star risings, specific stars that appear on the eastern horizon just before dawn, that are used to indicate direction, time of year, and even warn of seasonal dangers. These stars were grouped not by modern constellations, but by functional logic. The path of the camel, the line of the wells, the shadow of the hunter. The knowledge was embedded in Naj, or star verses, mnemonic poems often sung aloud during travel. Each line corresponded to a celestial movement, a seasonal wind, or a tribal landmark. To forget the verses was to lose the road. But no complete Bedouin star map exists in written form, and that is what makes their system so elusive. What survives is fragmented, transmitted through elders, captured briefly in the notes of 19th century explorers, and recorded imperfectly by early ethnographers. Some anthropologists believe the system was never meant to be fixed or universal. It was tailored for each tribe, each migration route, each region. The map was dynamic, shaped by local experience rather than formal astronomy. But others suggest a deeper origin. In recent years, comparative studies between Bedouin star lore and that of ancient Mesopotamia have revealed startling parallels. Certain bright stars, like Aldebaran, Sirius, and the Pleiades, appear in both systems, not just as astronomical bodies, but as characters. In both traditions, these stars are associated with warning, guidance, and fate. Could the Bedouin star maps be a living remnant of pre-Islamic or even pre-Babylonian sky knowledge? A fragmentary star chart found at the site of Dumas al-Jandal, an ancient oasis town in northern Saudi Arabia, has reignited this question. Scratched into a pottery shard, the markings appear to represent a seasonal calendar based on stellar risings. Though its origins are disputed, some scholars propose it may date to at least the first millennium BC. And yet, others argue the star maps are entirely indigenous, emerging organically from Bedouin observation and oral refinement. Over thousands of years of nightly exposure to the heavens, it is possible that each tribe developed its own understanding of stellar motion, tailored to practical survival rather than symbolic meaning. Even so, this raises a deeper question. How does one encode generations of precise astronomical observation without writing anything down? The answer, perhaps, lies in the structure of Bedouin oral culture itself. Every verse, every rhyme, every star name, no matter how obscure, served a purpose. In an oral society, forgetting was failure. To remember was to survive. And within that memory lies a system more elegant than any parchment chart. Stars grouped by rising times, cross-referenced by direction, interlinked with wind patterns, moon phases, animal migrations. It was not just a map, but a multi-sensory living algorithm. But there are still elements that baffle researchers. One such example is the recurring use of the phrase, the invisible path, found in older star verses. It refers to a route guided not by stars visible in the night sky, but by their absence. In other words, the Bedouin could navigate by what was not there, a missing constellation, a gap in the sky, a shadow cast by starlight that hinted at direction. This concept is not found in any classical astronomy. And what of the star wells, a term used in multiple tribes to describe certain constellations believed to mark places of hidden water beneath the sand? While modern science has found no direct correlation between star positions and underground aquifers, Bedouin reports are surprisingly consistent. Could these legends encode environmental cues we no longer recognize? In the Sinai, in Jordan, in the high deserts of Oman, scattered tribal elders still speak of these maps, but fewer each year. As modernization reshapes Bedouin life, the oral verses fade. Satellite phones replace shepherd stars. GPS erodes the need for poetic memory. Still, fragments survive. And it's in those fragments, half-remembered songs, the name of a single guiding star, the rhythm of a camel's pace under the crescent moon, that a vast, uncharted body of knowledge lies dormant. So, we are left with questions. Were the Bedouin star maps a unique human achievement? An independent desert-born astronomy that defies our written traditions? Or are they the last whispers of something older, an ancestral knowledge, passed not from generation to generation, but from civilization to civilization, through oral echoes and desert winds? What secrets still lie within the songs of the night? And if the stars remember, do we? Where the forests begin to give way to the misty, winding valleys of northern Iran, cradled in the folds of the Elburz Mountains near the Caspian Sea, lies a place little known beyond the quiet hum of archaeological circles. Here, at the confluence of river and ridge, lies a necropolis called Marlik. Today it's quiet, almost eerily so. Just the wind through cypress trees, the faint rustle of leaves along moss-covered stone. But beneath this stillness rests one of the most peculiar and least understood treasures of the ancient world. Metalwork so advanced, so intricately detailed, that even now we struggle to understand how it was created, or by whom. Discovered in the early 1960s by Iranian archaeologist Izzat Negaban, the site revealed not a city, not a palace, but a cemetery. Burial mounds numbering over 50, scattered across a green hillside. Within them, bodies were laid to rest alongside golden vessels, bronze weapons, ornamental plaques, and figurines that defy the expectations of what a Bronze Age society should have been capable of. The Marlik culture, believed to have flourished around 1400 to 1100 BC, is not mentioned in any known texts. It left behind no written language, no known records, no monumental inscriptions, only its dead and its metals. And those metals pose a mystery that still lingers. One of the most striking finds is a golden beaker, less than 6 inches tall, its surface adorned with detailed reliefs of lions, bulls, and stylized trees. The precision of its form, the symmetry of the repoussé design, and the uniform thinness of the metal suggest an artisanry far beyond what was thought to be typical of that time and region. But who were these craftsmen, and where did their techniques come from? Some scholars believe the Marlik artisans were part of the broader Iron Age cultures of the Iranian plateau, perhaps influenced by trade with the Assyrians, the Elamites, or the tribes of the Caucasus. Yet even among those sophisticated neighbors, the Marlik metalwork stands apart. The metallurgy itself is sophisticated. Alloys of copper and tin with remarkably consistent purity, casting methods that suggest the use of lost wax techniques, yet with no molds or tools recovered to confirm it. Certain daggers and swords show ribbing and channeling patterns on their blades that would later become common in much later Hellenistic weaponry. But here, they appear centuries too soon. Could this imply independent innovation? Or a now lost transmission of knowledge across regions we've yet to understand? And then there's the symbolism. Many of the Marlik artifacts bear iconography that seems both familiar and alien. Bulls with exaggerated horns, trees of life flanked by mythical beasts, hybrid animals with wings or serpentine tails. While similar symbols appear in Mesopotamian and Anatolian art, the Marlik versions are different, subtler, less rigid. Their compositions suggest not just decoration, but a symbolic system, perhaps even a spiritual language. Was Marlik the ceremonial heart of a forgotten people, whose beliefs and myths were encoded not in stone or script, but in gold and bronze? One piece in particular has drawn attention for decades: a solid gold bull's head found buried near the chest of a skeleton. Its facial features are rendered in stylized but expressive form, its hollow eyes once inlaid with a now vanished material. Was this a funerary idol, a guardian effigy, or perhaps a ritual object whose meaning has been lost with the culture that created it? More perplexing still is that no settlement corresponding to Marlik has ever been found. The burial mounds suggest a wealthy elite, rulers, warriors, priests. But where did they live? No nearby city ruins, no temples, no houses or public works. Only graves and the extraordinary things buried with them. Why would such advanced artistry emerge in isolation? Could Marlik have been a sacred burial site, maintained by a mobile or semi-nomadic people who left no permanent structures behind? Or could it be a fragment of a larger civilization, one lost beneath later developments, or simply yet undiscovered? More speculative theories propose an even stranger possibility: that Marlik was a repository of treasures brought from elsewhere, a kind of ritual vault into which sacred objects were interred not by their makers, but by those who inherited or looted them. This could explain the disparity between the quality of the artifacts and the absence of supporting infrastructure. But if so, where did the artifacts originally come from? Recent metallurgical analyses have shown that the ores used in some Marlik objects do not match local sources. Instead, they more closely resemble material from the Caucasus, or even regions as far west as the Balkans. Could the Marlik culture have been part of a forgotten trans-regional exchange network, operating outside the scope of what we typically associate with Bronze Age empires? One fringe theory, though lacking in direct evidence, suggests that the gold work of Marlik shares striking similarities with the Varna culture of the Black Sea coast, whose own golden treasures date to around 4500 BC. If this were true, it would suggest a continuity of metallurgical knowledge spanning thousands of years and hundreds of miles, a notion mainstream archaeology has yet to fully embrace. Still, even the most cautious researchers agree. The level of artistry displayed at Marlik should not exist in isolation. It speaks of a tradition, a school, a lineage of craftsmanship that required teaching, refinement, and cultural investment. And yet, no workshops have been found, no inscriptions naming kings or smiths, no scaffolding of history to support the skill. Just the objects themselves, quiet, gleaming, enigmatic. One golden goblet, engraved with intertwined animals, seems almost to challenge the observer. Understand me, if you can. So we're left, as with so many ancient puzzles, with more questions than answers. Who were the Marlik people? What forces allowed such artistry to flourish in apparent isolation? Was this the final flicker of a dying civilization, or the unrecorded peak of a thriving one we simply failed to notice? And what else might lie buried in the valleys of Gilan, waiting to be unearthed? Along the windswept shores of the Caspian Sea, where the rolling Caucasus Mountains descend into narrow plains, A stone barrier cuts across the land like a scar drawn by a forgotten giant. This is Derbent, a city whose roots plunge deep into antiquity, and whose walls, massive, orderly, imposing, tell a story few can fully unravel. At first glance, Derbent seems like just another relic of empire, its weathered stones part of the long military legacy of the ancient world. But as one draws closer, a quiet unease begins to stir. The architecture doesn't quite fit expectations. The design seems too deliberate, too precise, and the deeper one looks, the more questions arise. This is the Sassanid fortress at Derbent, a site officially dated to around the 5th or 6th century AD, built under the rule of Khorsabad of the Sassanid Empire. Its purpose, at least according to mainstream historians, was clear: a strategic bulwark defending the Persian Empire's northern frontier, controlling one of the narrowest corridors between the Caspian and the mountains, the so-called Caspian Gates. But while history records its military function, it's the structure's form, its baffling intricacy, unorthodox features, and stubborn defiance of simple categorization that leaves modern scholars and engineers alike scratching their heads. Two great walls, extending some 3,600 feet in length, span from the mountains to the sea, pinning Derbent between natural barriers. They are not merely defensive ramparts, but complex systems of stone chambers, underground passages, and unusually thick masonry. 20 stone towers rise at intervals along the length, yet their spacing doesn't conform to typical patterns of ancient fortification. Their placement seems calculated. But by what standard? The city's name itself, Derbent, derives from the Persian darband, meaning closed gate. But if this was merely a gate, why such an elaborate system of defense? And why here, of all places? The standard explanation is strategic. Derbent controlled the narrowest land route between the Eurasian steppes and Persia. It was the key to guarding against northern invaders, Scythians, Alans, or later the Khazars and Turks. And yet, there are other passes through the Caucasus that are easier to traverse, wider, and more geographically accommodating. So why build this massive fortification here? Adding to the mystery is the masonry itself. The stones, some weighing several tons, are cut with remarkable precision and bear no visible chisel marks. Some sections appear almost megalithic in scale, their joins so tight that it's difficult to insert even a blade of grass between them. The craftsmanship evokes comparison not with other Sassanid constructions, but with far older and more enigmatic sites across the Middle East and beyond. Were these walls entirely Sassanid? Or did Khosrow's builders expand upon an earlier foundation, something prehistoric, or at least pre-Persian? There are ancient local legends, half-remembered epics, and shadowy oral histories that speak of giants who built the first barriers at Derbent long before men recorded time. To the Avars and Lesgans, Derbent's origins are often associated with otherworldly forces or long-lost kings whose names no longer appear in any surviving texts. Of course, mainstream archaeology tends to view these as folklore, embellishments layered over time. Yet the precision and longevity of the fortress raise a fair question. If these were simply Sassanid walls, built with the technology of the 6th century, why have they withstood over 1,500 years of earthquakes, invasions, and environmental decay with minimal restoration? Another point of intrigue lies in the subterranean features. Beneath the fortress, archaeologists have found tunnels, cisterns, and what appear to be unused chambers, some of which predate the Sassanid masonry above. Their function is unknown. Some speculate they were escape routes. Others suggest ritual purposes, perhaps even remnants of a now vanished cultic presence. But again, no definitive inscriptions, no guideposts, just silent stone. Even more puzzling are artifacts discovered within the deeper layers, tools and pottery fragments that don't match known Sassanid styles. Some show influences that appear to come not from Persia, but from Central Asia, or even early Slavic cultures. Could Derbent have been built atop a much older settlement? One that straddled empires and ethnic lines, and whose identity has been lost? From a military standpoint, the layout of the fortress also presents some incongruities. Scholars have noted that certain arrow slits and wall segments face inward rather than out, suggesting either an unusual defensive strategy or perhaps a dual-purpose use: defense against outsiders and control over those within. Was Derbent a defensive stronghold or a prison? Still others point to astronomical alignments. Some towers seem to mark solstice points or lunar standstills, though the evidence remains debated. Is this a coincidence, or did Derbent once function as more than a fortress, as a cosmic gate, a kind of calendar in stone? Theories abound. Some propose that the Sassanid kings, inheritors of Zoroastrian cosmology, designed Derbent with dual purposes: physical defense and spiritual symbolism. Others go further, drawing comparisons between Derbent and ancient Mesopotamian ziggurats, suggesting that the fortress encodes cosmic order, like the walls of Babylon, meant to mirror celestial patterns. And then there are the more speculative ideas, proposed but not widely accepted, that Derbent may have been built with assistance from unknown technologies, or preserved from a lost civilization whose architectural knowledge far exceeded that of the documented Sassanid engineers. But these remain theories, fringe perhaps, but born of genuine perplexity. Because the mystery of Derbent is not rooted in lack of documentation alone. It's rooted in the experience of standing before it, in the silence of its passageways, the weight of its stones, the questions that rise, unbidden, in the face of its imposing geometry. How was this built with such skill, in such a place, and why? What forces, geopolitical, spiritual, or otherwise, compelled the construction of a fortress so massive, so meticulous, in this narrow corridor between sea and mountain? And what truths lie beneath its foundations, still buried in the dust of millennia? As the desert winds sweep across the crimson sands of northwest Saudi Arabia, sunlight catches the sharp edges of towering rock formations. Against a backdrop of endless blue sky, something unusual breaks the natural rhythm of the sandstone cliffs. Carved directly into the face of the rock, monumental facades rise in eerie silence. Doorways that lead to nowhere. Tombs standing like sentinels in a ghostly necropolis. This is Hegra, also known as Madan Saleh, a city carved from stone, weathered by time, and haunted by 1,000 unanswered questions. Located some 1,100 kilometers north of Mecca, near the ancient incense trade routes, Hegra is often referred to as the southern twin of Petra in Jordan. Like Petra, it was once part of the Nabataean kingdom, whose stonemasons transformed bare rock into living monuments. Yet unlike Petra, Hegra remained hidden in plain sight, untouched, unexplored, and largely unstudied until recent decades. The most striking feature of Hegra is its well-preserved tombs. More than 100 monumental facades, carved directly into massive sandstone outcrops. The symmetry is astonishing. Ornate cornices, columns, rosettes, and decorative panels adorn tomb entrances with a kind of silent grace. Their designs hint at a culture that blended artistic influences from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece, yet retained its own unique identity. But there is something else about these tombs, something quietly unsettling. Despite the grandeur of the facades, the interiors are remarkably sparse. Many consist of little more than a single stone chamber, empty except for shallow burial niches carved into the walls. Some are sealed off entirely, Others show signs of being deliberately abandoned. Who were these tombs for? And why were they never used? Mainstream historians place Hegra's peak between the 1st century BC and 1st century AD, during the height of Nabataean power. The Nabataeans, famed for their hydraulic engineering and trade networks, controlled vast swaths of the Arabian Peninsula. They left inscriptions, mostly in Nabataean Aramaic, but their written legacy is surprisingly limited. Few documents survive. No detailed records explain the construction or purpose of Hegra in its entirety. It's as though this city of stone sprang into being, and then was suddenly left behind. Some scholars argue that Hegra was intended purely as a necropolis, a city of the dead, built for elite burials rather than habitation. But the sheer scale of the site, its strategic location along major caravan routes, and the presence of wells, water channels, and urban planning suggest a more complex narrative. The most confounding aspect? No substantial evidence of a large permanent living population has ever been found nearby. No palace, no major residential zones, no definitive temple complex, only tombs and silence. And then there are the biblical echoes. Madain Salih is associated in Islamic tradition with the ancient Tamudic people who, according to the Quran, were punished by divine wrath for rejecting the prophet Salih. Their city, possibly Hegra, is said to have been struck by a thunderous cry from the heavens. The people vanished. Their stone dwellings, however, endured. To this day, local folklore surrounds the ruins with a sense of fear and reverence. For centuries, Bedouins avoided the site altogether, calling it a cursed place. They whispered of spirits, jinn, and unexplained lights flickering in the night. Even now, some visitors report a sense of unease while walking among the tombs, an impression that the city is watching, waiting. But myths aside, the real mystery persists. Why was Hegra abandoned so abruptly? One theory suggests environmental collapse. Perhaps a sudden drop in the water table rendered the region unsustainable. Yet archaeological evidence shows carefully engineered wells and water management systems still intact long after supposed abandonment. Others propose political shifts. The Roman annexation of the Nabataean kingdom around 106 AD may have redirected trade routes and administrative priorities northward to Petra and beyond. But even that fails to explain the sudden halt in tomb construction. Inscriptions show a thriving culture up until the mid-2nd century. Then, nothing. Could there have been an epidemic, a conflict, or an internal religious upheaval that forced a retreat from the site? Or was Hegra always intended to serve a purpose we have yet to fully comprehend? Some researchers point to symbolic geometry in the tomb layouts. Certain alignments between tombs, mountain peaks, and celestial events suggest a deeper cosmological significance. Were these not just burial chambers, but markers in a spiritual map? A sacred landscape encoded in stone? Then there are the enigmatic carvings and inscriptions. Many remain untranslated. Others hint at rituals and titles whose meanings have been lost to time. Could the tombs have been used for purposes beyond burial, initiations, mystery cults, or ancestral worship? Fringe theories go further. They ask whether Hegra predates the Nabataeans entirely. Some posit that the Nabataeans repurposed an already ancient site, adding their facades to structures whose true age is yet undetermined. Supporting this idea are Tamudic petroglyphs, older inscriptions found nearby that suggest habitation in the region as far back as 1000 BC or earlier. Could Hegra be a palimpsest of civilizations, each building atop the last, until even the builders forgot what came before? Satellite imagery has revealed unexcavated structures and geometric patterns buried beneath the sands near Hegra. Are these remnants of a forgotten urban core, or merely natural formations mistaken for man-made alignments? Excavations are ongoing, and while each discovery brings new fragments of clarity, they also deepen the enigma. Why would a culture go to such lengths to carve monumental tombs into rock, only to leave them sealed, unused, or undecorated within? What drove the Nabataeans, so adept at living with the desert, to construct such a haunting city of the dead, and then simply vanish from it? As the light fades over Hegra's sandstone cliffs, the shadows grow longer, creeping into the empty doorways of its facades. They seem less like tombs and more like questions etched into the stone, questions still awaiting answers. What else lies beneath the sand? What knowledge did the Nabataeans carry with them into history's silence? And perhaps more chillingly, what were they running from, if anything at all? As the camera slowly pans across the flat, sun-bleached plains of southern Iraq, a low mound rises from the horizon. Dust swirls lazily in the heat, catching golden light as it drifts over remnants of an ancient city long buried beneath time. This is Uruk, the first true city in human history, a cradle of civilization, and home to secrets that still defy explanation. At the heart of this once great metropolis stands the vestige of a structure unlike any other from antiquity: the White Temple. Perched atop a massive rectangular ziggurat, it once gleamed with gypsum-plastered walls that reflected the Mesopotamian sun, earning it the name by which we know it today. But its brilliance was more than visual. In function, form, and symbolism, it suggests something far deeper, something that archaeologists, historians, and theorists still grapple with. What was the true purpose of the White Temple? Why was it constructed with such precision and prominence more than 5,000 years ago? And why does it seem to stand apart, not only from its surroundings, but from time itself? The city of Uruk, established around 4000 BC, is considered by many to be humanity's first city in the modern sense of the word, a complex urban center with monumental architecture, organized governance, and, crucially, writing. It was here that the cuneiform script emerged, etched onto clay tablets to record trade, rituals, laws, and myths. And towering above it all was the White Temple. Constructed around 3500 BC, during the Uruk period, the ziggurat on which it stands is one of the earliest of its kind, a prototype for the stepped pyramids that would later define Mesopotamian religious architecture. The temple itself is relatively small, but its placement and design command attention. Built using mud bricks and covered in a dazzling white gypsum plaster, it could be seen from miles across the flat Mesopotamian plain. A stairway led up the sides, possibly used for ritual processions. The structure was aligned with the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west, with a precision that suggests knowledge of astronomy far beyond what is often credited to the period. Why was such an effort made to elevate and illuminate this building? Who, or what, was it meant to glorify? Mainstream scholars agree that the temple was likely dedicated to Anu, the sky god of Sumerian mythology. Anu was the father of the gods, the one who ruled over heaven itself. To honor him, it would make sense that a temple would be raised to reach the heavens, catching light, standing high above the mortal world below. But while the symbolic logic is sound, the details raise questions. No statue of Anu has ever been found at the site. No definitive inscriptions confirm the temple's purpose. No burial, treasure, or sacred object has ever been unearthed within its walls. Only fragments, foundation bricks, crumbling walls, and the haunting impression of meticulous, intentional design. Some historians interpret this as evidence of a ritual space that served ceremonial rather than functional purposes, perhaps even a center of sacred governance, where rulers channeled divine authority through elaborate rites. But that explanation leads to further puzzles. Why build it with such costly gypsum plaster, a material that had to be transported from distant sources? Why emphasize visibility from such great distances, in an era where no other buildings in the city matched its scale or elevation? And more curiously, why is the White Temple's Ziggurat foundation oriented in a way that may have astronomical significance? Recent research suggests that the temple's alignment may correspond with key celestial events. Could the builders of Uruk have tracked solstices, equinoxes, or planetary cycles? Was the White Temple not merely a house for the gods, but an observatory, a bridge between earth and sky? More speculative theories take this idea further. Some propose that the White Temple may have been part of a priestly knowledge system, a place where early mathematicians and astronomers encoded cosmic cycles into architecture. Others wonder if its construction reflects pre-Sumerian traditions, now lost to time, perhaps even knowledge inherited from a much older civilization that left behind no written records, only sacred geometry. Still, others point to similarities with later religious architecture across distant cultures. The elevated sacred platform, the white exterior, the symbolism of ascent. Could this motif, which would appear in Egyptian temples, Mesoamerican pyramids, and even Himalayan stupas, have originated here? There are, of course, more grounded explanations. The White Temple may have simply been the administrative hub of an early theocracy. Its height could have served as a visual claim to power, a way for early rulers to legitimize their authority by literally rising above the population, but even that invites more questions than it answers. Why does the White Temple stand in such stark isolation from later religious structures? Why do later temples in Uruk seem to disregard its scale, style, and orientation? Did its function and perhaps even its memory fall out of favor, deliberately or otherwise? Archaeologists working at Uruk have uncovered thousands of clay tablets, revealing everything from trade ledgers to myths of the gods. Yet the White Temple, arguably the most prominent structure in the early city, remains curiously absent from the narrative. It is as if the city remembered how to write, but chose not to write about this. Was it taboo, sacred beyond record, or simply forgotten? Even its rediscovery in the 20th century raised eyebrows. Early excavators were struck not only by its antiquity, but by its preservation, its foundations having survived millennia of weather, war, and abandonment. Its walls still hint at symmetry. Its steps still rise with a strange gravity, as if urging the modern mind to climb, not just physically, but conceptually. What was the world like when the White Temple was built? Before dynasties, before kings, before iron, before wheels, before Egypt's first pyramid, before writing even took its most developed form. What kind of people could conceive of such a monument, so early in human history, and why did they build it the way they did? The White Temple of Uruk stands not just as a structure, but as a question. One we're only beginning to ask with the tools of modern archaeology, architecture, and astronomy. Its white walls have faded. Its plaster has crumbled. But the echoes remain, resonating through ancient stone, through undeciphered myth, through the very foundations of civilization. And perhaps the most haunting question of all still lingers in the wind above the ruins. Was this temple the beginning of something, or the last whisper of something long forgotten? The wind whispers across the Zagros Mountains, carrying with it the silence of a forgotten empire. The ridges are sharp, their jagged forms like ancient stone sentinels guarding secrets buried beneath centuries of dust and shadow. Here, among these highlands of northwestern Iran, once stood the heartland of a people who helped shape the foundation of the ancient Near East, the Medes. Yet today, almost nothing remains. No towering citadels, no royal tombs, no sprawling palaces engraved with triumphant scenes. The Median Empire, if it truly was one, has all but vanished from the landscape. It's a historical paradox, an empire that, according to classical sources, once rivaled Assyria and Babylon in power, yet left behind almost no trace of its existence. How does an entire empire disappear? The Medes are first mentioned in Assyrian records around the 9th century BC. At the time, they were a loose confederation of tribal groups inhabiting the rugged highlands east of Mesopotamia. For generations, the Assyrians launched campaigns into Median territory, recording battles, tribute, and shifting alliances. And then, according to both Mesopotamian tablets and later Greek accounts, something remarkable happened. By the 7th century BC, the Medes had grown strong enough to challenge the once invincible Assyrian Empire. In a pivotal moment in 612 BC, the Medes, led by their king Cyaxares, joined forces with the Babylonians to sack Nineveh, the Assyrian capital. The event marked the dramatic fall of one of history's most brutal empires. The Medes, it seemed, had arrived on the world stage. Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, claimed that the Medes went on to build an empire stretching from eastern Anatolia to modern-day Afghanistan. He names a line of Median kings and even describes the capital at Ecbatana, a city of 7 concentric walls, each painted a different color, crowned with golden rooftops. According to Herodotus, it was one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. But modern archaeology tells a murkier tale. Despite decades of excavation, the ruins of Ecbatana, believed to lie beneath the modern city of Hamadan, have yielded little evidence of imperial grandeur. No inscriptions naming Median kings, no monumental architecture, no archives, temples, or palaces definitively attributed to the Medes. Aside from a handful of ceramics, some traces of fortifications, and a few bronze objects, there is almost nothing to confirm the picture painted by Herodotus. Was the Median Empire a true empire at all? Some historians argue that Herodotus exaggerated the size and structure of the Median realm, projecting the Persian Achaemenid Empire of his own time backward onto the Medes. Perhaps the Medes were never centralized. Perhaps they were a powerful tribal confederation, formidable in battle, but loosely organized, without the administrative machinery of a true state. Yet that theory, too, leaves gaps. The coordination required to defeat Assyria was no small feat. Could such a decentralized society have mounted such a campaign without strong leadership, diplomacy, and military strategy? And if the Medes truly ruled over vast lands for nearly a century, why has not a single inscription bearing the name of Cyaxares, Phraortes, or Astyages been found? Why do we know their names only from foreign sources? Even the Medes language remains a mystery. It was likely an early Iranian dialect related to Old Persian and Avestan, but no Median texts survive. The very identity of the Medes, beyond what their enemies and successors said about them, is shrouded in silence. One of the few tangible signs of Median influence lies not in texts or cities, but in cultural echoes. Some scholars suggest that Median elites may have played a key role in the formation of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Persian dynasty, was said to be the grandson of a Median king. According to tradition, he rebelled against his Median overlord, Astyages, in 550 BC and absorbed the Median realm into his own. But was this a conquest or a peaceful merger? The Persians adopted many elements that seem Median in character: royal court dress, titles, certain military traditions, and administrative practices. Some even argue that the Achaemenid Empire was, in its earliest phase, a continuation of Median power under a new name. If that is the case, then perhaps the Medes never vanished. Perhaps they were simply absorbed, rebranded, folded quietly into the next chapter of imperial rule. But again, the evidence is thin. And then there are the stranger theories. A few fringe scholars and alternative historians have speculated that the Medes were not a single ethnic group, but a coalition of ancient Indo-Iranian priest-kings whose real power lay not in walls and cities, but in rituals, astrology, and secret knowledge. In this view, the Medes were never interested in writing their history in stone, but rather in guarding it through oral traditions and esoteric practices, later reflected in the Magi, the mysterious priestly caste referenced in Greek and biblical texts. Others have looked at the geographical obscurity of Median settlements, often located in remote mountainous regions. Could the lack of remains simply be a result of erosion, inaccessibility, or the fact that major Median sites lie undiscovered beneath modern towns, roads, and farmland? The truth, for now, remains out of reach. The Medes were powerful enough to change the course of history, toppling an empire, setting the stage for Persia's rise, yet they are almost absent from the archaeological record. It's a silence that feels deliberate, haunting even. An empire glimpsed through the eyes of its enemies and successors, never speaking in its own voice. What else might lie beneath the hills of western Iran, waiting to be unearthed? What tablets, tombs, or inscriptions might still be hidden beneath layers of soil and asphalt, offering answers to the riddle of the Medes? Or was their disappearance a kind of victory in itself, a chosen erasure, a retreat from empire into legend? As the sun sets behind the Zagros range, casting long shadows over the ancient valleys once roamed by Median kings, one cannot help but wonder, was the Median Empire a historical mirage, or a forgotten reality still buried in the earth, quietly waiting to be remembered?